Across the whole world, the day felt weirdly calm, like nothing could possibly go wrong. The Demon Lord finally fell, crushed by the hero's power. And nobody had to dive into deadly adventures anymore, so everything changed. As a result, the villagers' shops in the beginner village had crumpled into misery, all because customers never showed up. Back then, the villager was hunched over, fixing something under the cool shade of his shop, when a woman stepped in and told him to slow down. His focus slipped for a second, and then he went down hard. Still, he forced his breathing steady, telling himself the repairs were already done. The woman rushed to check if he was hurt, and the villager quickly swore everything was totally fine, nothing had been damaged at all. He even flashed her his drink and his clothes to prove things were exactly the same as before. And Mr. Cart was right there too. Then Ian and the villager urged him to buy a healing potion from his shop. Then Mr. Cart shot him down fast and hard, and afterward he tried to smooth things over with the villager, swearing he never meant to come off so harsh. The villager nodded and said he'd be there any time they needed him, then even shoved a pamphlet from his shop into their hands, begging them to stop by whenever they needed supplies. After Mr. Cart stormed out, everyone crowded in to praise the villager for what he'd done, but hinted that maybe he'd be better off stacking odd jobs and scraping together a living instead. Running an item shop had become brutally hard in those days. A villager called home a place people labeled a beginner village, the so-called Level 1 village. A quiet little paradise where life moves slow, calm, and carefree, like the world decided to stop rushing. The monsters surrounding him weren't big shots at all. They were all low-ranked. And it was right from this village that adventurers launched their journeys, ready to clash with the demon army's endless hordes. Among those adventurers stood a young man destined to become a legend, because once he finally crushed the Demon Lord, everyone would hail him as the hero. Turns out, Lord Villager wasn't some legendary hero at all. He was just a kid born right in that village, and he was totally honest, with zero special skills to his name. His father had handed him that strange name, and he'd even built the item shop from the ground up. A shop that doubled as home and workplace for the villagers, people called it Nest. People swear the shop was legendary because the hero of legend grabbed his very first item from there about 10 years ago. Even with that honorable title, the shop still turned into villagers' biggest nightmare. Ian Villager slipped back to his room to tally that month's earnings, and when he saw the total, it came out to a whopping 124,000 yield. After tallying every last bill, he realized he made 200 more than last month, and that win hit him like pure joy. It slammed him with memories of the old days, when adventurers swarmed in huge numbers and goods were flying off shelves non-stop, even his own shop, back when the streets were packed with hopefuls ready to chase their dreams. Now that once bustling little shop sat in ruins, the village around it kept things eerily calm, no accidents, no shocks, no weird events ever popping up. Healing potions and antidotes were almost never even needed, like trouble somehow always held its tongue. So yeah, Yev Villager counted himself lucky if he landed even one customer all month long. Still, he couldn't help but feel satisfied, because deep down he knew this kind of quiet calm wasn't the least bit bad. The second he stepped outside, a strange sound snapped his attention. He clocked it instantly. A girl had slipped, and her foot accidentally smashed the shop's wooden sign. The villager couldn't help but worry. Was she really okay? 8. A villager spotted the girl's golden eyes glowing bright as day. He froze at the sight. Those eyes hit him like nothing he'd ever seen before. He hurried to straighten the shop's flag, then couldn't stop worrying. Was she hurt anywhere? The girl bolted out right away, snapping at him not to get in the way. The villager just stared at her, totally baffled by the way she chose her words. After he dashed back to his shop, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Something about her screamed, "Not from the village," and he only confirmed it later when he was reading a book. Then he found out that golden eyes were supposedly the exclusive mark of demons. At first, it rattled him to the core, but before long, he forced himself to breathe easy and told himself, all the demons were already wiped out, and the hero had done it. With no customers coming in that day, he grabbed the time and waxed the shop floor instead. Suddenly, the mayor showed up and demanded to speak with the villager. She told everyone the village was getting reborn as a holy land, the very place where the hero's journey started, and that promise would spark a total revival. The villager finally nodded along as she said this spot was on the hero's path. Then she revealed the council's plan. Buy the villager's item shop, tear it down, and replace it with a memorial museum honoring the hero. Rage exploded in the villager's chest. He snapped that the mayor had to get out right now, calling it pure tyranny, and swore he'd never sell the shop. Meanwhile, the mayor fought back, insisting this was for the villager's own good. She said everyone kept panicking that he'd burn himself out just to keep the shop alive. Then she leaned in and asked if he really wasn't miserable living like that. And he shared that the villagers even scraped together their savings to help him kick off a whole new life. Despite this, the villagers shoved her back hard and snapped that it wasn't their business how he lived. Then the mayor fired off a warning. If he wanted the shop to live on, he'd have to make sure the heir eventually stepped in and took over. She warned that if he couldn't land a wife, the shop would vanish for good, and that snapped villagers' rage into overdrive. He shot back that if he ever tied the knot, the villagers would probably cut him off and stop backing his shop for good. So yeah, he might as well go along with it because the mayor swore he'd misunderstood everything she said. Then the villager snapped out of the conversation for good, heading straight for the nearby town of Nimbatu. He slipped into a bar and, just like that, ran into several girls. One of them leaned in and introduced herself as Elise. The villager stepped forward and introduced himself right then, as if that was the only thing he needed to do. They burst into laughter when they confirmed his name really did mean villager, and honestly, they couldn't stop finding it cute and hilarious. Then she leaned in and asked him straight what he did for work and how much money he actually made. The villager finally confessed he owned an item shop, only for everyone to realize the place was struggling badly right now. She leaned in and asked if he had any big clients. He shot back, "Yeah, the hero himself used to come to this shop." That shocking news lit up the whole crowd, and they leaned in fast, begging him to spill every story he knew about the hero. A villager told him that the moment the hero first stepped into the shop, they handed him nothing but a plain wooden stick. As the story kept rolling, the crowd turned on him fast, calling him a liar, and they dragged him out of the bar, even though every word he said was the truth. As he stepped out, his father's memories crashed back in, one after another. Then the villager started the grueling trek back home, coughing up a ton of money just to get transportation for part of the journey. He looked back on something that happened a little over 12 years ago, when that shop was still booming and life felt unstoppable. Back then, he snapped at his father, saying the sales numbers and the inventory counts didn't line up. His father told him he'd hand out freebies to folks who couldn't pay, and the villager snapped back that once one person got special treatment for free, everyone else would demand the same. His father just chuckled and shot back, asking if the villager really was only 6 years old. He's just trying to help people, and that's the truth he's pushing hard. The villager snapped with pure frustration, swearing that the moment he took over the shop, he'd chase profits with zero distractions, only then. 2 years later, rumors crashed into the world. Turns out, the demon lord had finally been defeated. A villager asked his father, "So, in a peaceful world, would your shop have to close at all?" Back then, his father just stayed calm and quietly gave the okay, like he already knew everything would be fine. He promised the villager, "When the time hits, rip down that nest and build the shop you've always dreamed of." That could turn into a real gold mine. When they stared at the hero's photograph, both of them hit the same wall. Total shock. Not long after everything went down, the devastating news hit Villager. His father had died. He got left totally alone, stuck in a loop of questions, wondering why his father dashed out on that delivery when the rain was tearing down like nothing else. A villager sobbed his heart out in total despair, then clenched his fist and swore this wouldn't be the end of everything. Even after the demon lord fell, he swore he'd keep running that shop no matter what came at him next. He shoved those thoughts down, but they kept clawing back, because peace had finally settled over the world, yet his own life still felt like nothing had gone right. For one quick, shame-soaked second, he even wondered if that demon lord were still alive, maybe his shop never would have been forced to shut down. He snapped at himself right away for even thinking it, then realized just how dead wrong it was. At that exact moment, his eyes snapped to the same girl perched on the cliff's edge, and his whole body jolted with shock, terrified that one wrong step could drop her straight into danger. Without a single second of doubt, she suddenly sprang forward. The villager sprinted with every ounce of strength, then yanked the rope tight and lashed it to a nearby log. And he caught her in his arms just in time. Then the log snapped, and they both crashed down together. The villager ate the full hit of that fall and shouted at the girl to stay safe no matter what. His head slammed into a jagged stone, his skull caved in, and he died on the spot. The girl stood there, completely wrecked with confusion, spiraling in her own thoughts. She realized she'd tried to end her life over and over again, counting each failed attempt like it was a habit. But this time, someone finally blocked her path, like it was the first time she'd been stopped at all. Right then, Mouthmole popped up and declared that the boy had been trying to protect her. Because she looked like a little human girl, Villager didn't even hesitate. He acted on instinct. The girl sneered at the villager as a pitiful human, and Mouthmole smirked. He'd already figured she wouldn't go down. Still, every girl couldn't shake this strange, heavy guilt from her heart. When she realized the villager kept grinning, even as death took him, she snapped awake to the fact that Villager had dared to pity her. Not just once, but twice. She decided she wanted nothing to do with owing him. No favors, no debt, nothing at all. She cut herself. That one lone drop hit the villager's body and declared she'd grant him a sliver of mercy. She knew if she did this, a villager might turn into her kin or just die for good, even so. She just prayed, please, not the boy named Villager, that he wouldn't end up as some hideous corpse. After what felt like forever, he jolted awake in his own room. His mind reeled with confusion, and he couldn't stop wondering if what he'd heard earlier was truly real or just a lie. The mayor rushed him in and told the villagers to get ready. People from the capital just arrived, and things were about to kick off. And the villagers immediately recognized them as the same brave fighters who had battled in the Great War against the Demon Lord. Next up, they were the Royal Knights. Captain Julius and the rest stormed straight to the villager's shop. The villager burst with joy and demanded, "Mayor, why did the Royal Knights roll in here?" The mayor answered, "They came on an inspection run, but one of their carts snapped a wheel. Then those healing potions smashed to pieces. Now they're stuck here for now, resting up and restocking while they recover in the village." Julius leaned in and demanded to know if the villager had any elixirs left. The villager snapped back that their shop didn't stock anything like that at all. He knew elixirs were ultra-rare, top-tier healing potions, and he'd also heard the capital had some hidden away. That lit a spark under him, and now he couldn't stop wondering, if he headed to the capital, could he finally catch a glimpse of the hero? Jules leaned in and started talking about the flag, telling everyone that the shop saw it as pure pride, something they bragged about. He told me the hero once came into that shop and snagged his very first item. About 12 years earlier, he finally let it slip. It turns out, back then, the hero was still barely old enough to be called a hero, and he'd only brought along a plain wooden stick. The villagers hoisted the flag high, praying the hero would one day come back and step into their lives again. Jules ripped the flag down, calling it out like a crime. He snapped that everyone was making it up, insisting the hero had already taken that very path on his journey, and now they're turning it into a tourist trap, calling the place a holy land and slapping sacred labels on everyday stuff like it's priceless relics. He said nobody truly knew where or how the hero was born, then made it clear this wasn't just a fighter, he was sacred. He ripped into the villager for spreading lies and said those lies would be paid for by execution. But the villager shot back, insisting his work and reputation had truthfully started there. Then one of the men snapped that Jules's career had slammed to a halt right in the middle. Too perfect, too weird, and way too suspicious to ignore. The knights started to suspect the villagers rigged a trap on purpose so their cart would crash, forcing them to halt and refill supplies at the villager's shop. They tore into the shop non-stop, blasting its shady practices at every turn. Then the villager snapped back to the past in full clarity, grabbed the knights by the resolve in his voice, and ordered them to get out because he had nothing to sell them. Right before things spiraled out of control, the mayor stepped in, stopped the chaos, and rushed over to apologize to the knights. He finally confessed that the flag was his idea and his call, and blurted out that it was a lie, insisting he'd only wanted to breathe new life into the village, and he'd commanded the villagers to build it for him. He swore that if punishment had to strike, it should land on him and no one else. Jules swallowed the mayor's words like they were truth, and when the knights finally got ready to ride off, the villager was left reeling after he grilled the mayor right afterward. The mayor threw out another apology, flat out admitting he didn't even have the nerve to get angry. The villager's shame hit like Strive's wave. Realizing the mayor had gone all out, risking everything just to keep him safe, and it burned in him that he'd been the unfair one all along. The villager took every cruel jab in silence, swallowing the pain as guilt crushed him for believing he was a worthless son. The mayor got hauled off by the royal knights, right under everyone's stunned eyes. And later, while everyone else was downing drinks and partying like nothing could go wrong, a lamp snapped out of nowhere and the whole area crumbled into sudden, choking darkness. A nightmare of a monster burst into view right in front of them, leaving everyone totally stunned. Then the story snapped to that mysterious girl Villager had been fighting to shield this whole time. She stood there with the mouth mole, and it hit her hard. Everything they said about anyone who entered Level 1 Village getting weaker was just a straight-up lie. She had never signed off on that idea herself, and she planned to find out the truth right then, firsthand. The mouth mole blurted out, half to himself. "Now that you're not the monster ruler anymore, Mao, what are you even here for?" And demanded to know what her next move was. The story snapped back into the mess the monster unleashed, sending the royal knights into full-on panic. Out of the crowd, a villager suddenly burst into view, completely out of control, charging straight at Jules with wild fury, demanding an apology for what had been done. Jules, shaking with terror, blurted apologies again and again. Then the villager jabbed a finger at him and demanded to know if Julius really wanted him to lead the way, or if he even planned to vanish and start over. Right when they rolled up to the mayor, parked in his carriage outside, the knights blurted urgently that monsters had just appeared, and demanded they summon the hero right there. They finally spilled the truth. The monster they'd faced wasn't just any beast, it was the demon lord himself. But when the villager caught his reflection in the mirror, then he froze in confusion. One of his eyes had gone completely black, and it looked badly injured. Fear hit him like a truck, and he screamed at the top of his lungs. Blasted by the memories of those monsters, he couldn't even piece together what the hell just happened to him. On his side, a strange girl sat right in front of him, staring like she couldn't believe it, saying he'd truly blown her away. Then she leaned in and insisted that he didn't just change her skin, and he'd also ripped off a piece of her power source. And it left her staring, wondering who he really was underneath it all. When Villager heard that, fear hit him hard. He stared around like, "Who are you? And what on earth is happening to me?" She slid in close, planted her leg on him, and praised the timing as perfect, then warned him that he was still far too weak to ever become her successor. So she'd watch him with her own eyes to see if he truly earned the right to share her blood. She looked him in the eyes and demanded to know why he'd risked everything to save her, pointing out that nobody in their right mind would ever try to save a demon. The villager snapped into an apology and blurted out, "I had no idea she was a demon!" She said it like he was nothing but a little kid, and when he heard that, Ice stared at him like something clicked, licked her lips, then snapped and bit down on his hand out of nowhere. Then she turned to him and demanded he bite her back. A terrifying warning hit him. If he didn't do it, he'd die. She finally made it official, revealing she was Mao, the 776th former Demon Lord. Then he declared that the villager was about to become the 777th Demon Lord. The villager froze in total disbelief after hearing those words, because deep down, he'd been dreaming that the hero would finally step into his shop. In the dream, the villager crumbled with emotion and practically begged to guide the hero. Then, out of nowhere, the hero lunged in, drove a sword through him, and swore the new demon lord's heart was living inside the villager. And he'd come there with one mission: to destroy it. And the villager shot awake from the dream like it was real. Finally, the whole mess was over, and relief hit like a wave. His relief evaporated the instant he spotted monster after monster closing in around him. Weren't he? And that thought terrified him. The monsters screamed at the top of their lungs, and the non-stop chaos became downright unbearable. The villager stepped outside, and there was Mao, sitting right there, calmly munching like nothing happened. "Good morning," she said to him, and said he looked totally wrecked from the day before. She shoved him toward a seat, told him to eat up, and tossed out like it was nothing that they could pick up where they left off. Then she casually called him the new demon lord. Then the villager snapped back to the exact second he first got the blood bond symbol. Mao leaned in and dropped the truth. She was the 776th demon lord, and then she laid out, point by point, why everything had to happen for those specific reasons. She had been chasing death, like it was the only thing left worth finding. To pull it off, she had to hand every last ounce of her power to a successor, someone destined to rise as the next demon lord. And she picked the villager for that part. The villager's stomach dropped. He'd convinced himself it was all a dream. Then the truth hit. It was real, and it shook him to the core. He snapped and yelled that nobody could use his kitchen without permission. Mal shot back that she'd already cooked up enough food to last him. So yeah, he better be grateful, because this was homemade cooking from a former demon lord. Then the villager whipped around and saw every last shelf of his food was totally wiped out. When Mao pushed to keep talking, the villager started to answer and then abruptly froze mid-sentence. He started noticing weird stuff all around the shop. Some items were bursting into flames while others froze solid, and it was all because different demons were pulling the strings. He screamed at everyone to stop wrecking his store right now. In the blink of an eye, every demon froze, then snapped to obedience. Mal told them they'd obeyed his orders because he was the demon lord. Did she just say that this was the very first skill every demon lord's successor has to learn? And one of the true requirements to become a demon. She even spilled this. Somehow, that villager had used the exact same skill earlier, and it drove the royal knights straight away without them realizing it. Mao couldn't stop smiling as she blurted out that the villager was way more perfect as the demon lord than she'd ever dared to hope. And somehow, everything would turn out just fine. Villager blurted out an immediate protest the second Vine hit the scene. He roared that he wanted absolutely nothing to do with that role. He swore he was just a nobody villager and didn't need those powers, then demanded she take them back. Right then, the air turned ice cold, and the whole place instantly felt terrifying. Mao shot him an icy apology, saying she couldn't make out a single word he was saying, and it hit him like a cold splash. Maybe she'd heard his words wrong and taken it as a command to reclaim the power. Then the villager panicked, realizing she was moments away from cutting him down. Instead, she yanked him out to test his powers herself and guided him straight into the tutorial woods. The villager froze when he spotted his horn back on his head, then tried to slink away on pure instinct. Mao snapped, "Don't move like that!" The villager snapped, "Why is this happening now?" Because his transformation usually only hits after sunset, and she told him the terrifying truth. Demons power up the moment the night goes dark. And at that moment, their power was at its absolute peak. So she wanted to find out just how much his raw strength had surged. She zeroed in on a huge stone and told him, straight up, to smash it. Villagers shot him down, shouting that he was still human. Mao nonchalantly crushed the stone with one flick of his finger, and when the villager swung his fist, he crumpled instantly. He couldn't even pass the test. And Mao tossed that aside and started testing his magical powers. The villager admitted he couldn't cast a single spell at all. That made Mao keep blurting out apologies over and over, and the villager fumbled through it, asking her to stop, but never once meeting her eyes. Right after Mao shoots the breeze with the mouth mole, she caught the villager's attention and begged him to let her teach him a summoning spell. She told him that if a villager spilled his own blood as a sacrifice, he could summon a magic beast, and she made him promise to follow her instructions to the letter. Then villager dug at his hand to draw the blood. The moment he finished the summoning, the Leviathan didn't just show up, it appeared for real. The villager practically exploded with excitement, stunned by just how insanely impressive it was. Mao and the mouth mole headed out to check on the villager, eyes locked and nerves on fire. He muttered that maybe the summoned creature wasn't meant to obey him fully. Mao snapped back that only the magic beasts bound by contracts would answer his command, not those regular monsters, especially not the prideful ones. And then the villager pushed, asking if his power stretched past just summoning. They checked the villager's status again, same as before, no changes at all. And all Mao's hope just got crushed. The villager stared at his hand, shocked the cut had already healed. Then his joy snapped into bitter disappointment. As their talk dragged on, he finally understood he couldn't slip out at night the way he used to. The mouth mole smirked, saying the villager's current level looked completely trashed, but then promised his rank would skyrocket fast under the mouth mole's guidance. He told them straight up that it was his duty to handle every single daily need of the demon lore. Mao tried to talk the villager down. Then, out of nowhere, he snapped, yelling that it was over. That was it. He declared, loud and clear, that he wasn't about to become the next demon lord. He made it crystal clear. He wasn't some schemer at all, just a regular villager determined to keep running the item shop he loved. He said he wouldn't help anyone meet their end. Even if Mao really was a demon lord, he still refused to let anyone die. He swallowed his pride, begged for forgiveness, and told her to just stop chasing him. At that exact moment, Mao snapped to his feet and thundered that the villager was seriously wrong. She snapped, "Who gave you the right to turn down a gift from a former demon lord?" She snapped that none of it was about what he wanted or refused. He should be grateful to her, and that was the end of it. Then she exploded forward and slammed him down to the ground. The mouth mole snapped at her to calm down, reminding her that villager was just an ordinary person and that her own malice would be the only thing she needed to crush him. Amal answered, admitting she already knew. But she insisted it was a power she had to lock down at any cost, because villager was her one true lifeline, the only way she'd ever break free. Mouth mole stayed glued to Mao's side, and Mao couldn't help but wonder, why wouldn't he just leave? He answered that even if she's no longer the queen of all monsters, hearing that, he couldn't possibly drop her over something so tiny. He wasn't that kind of heartless. Mao let out a real heavy sigh of relief. Next morning, the moment villager opened his eyes, he froze. Monsters were sprawled across his bed like they owned the place. He was still shocked, but after everything that came after, this kind of madness had started to feel normal to him. Outside, Mao met him with open arms, and he spotted the shop packed to the brim with customers. Mao was He was swamped juggling all of it, and the villager couldn't help but wonder what on earth was going on. The mayor showed up any moment now, so I went ahead and asked the big question. Was the villager feeling any better? And he couldn't help but gush that he'd snagged the most amazing wife. People kept staring at villager in disbelief, wondering how he even pulled off marrying someone that gorgeous. The mayor said villager's wife took over the shop, panicked that the rumor was spreading, and that's why adventurers from everywhere flooded in to grab supplies. They could barely believe those bargain elixirs showed up in some tiny village, and they grilled Mao on where the ingredients came from, only to find he wouldn't spill a single word, calling it an untouchable business secret. Inside the staff-only area, a villager stumbled on a monster chained up tight, forced to grind out elixirs like some kind of living machine. That left him reeling. He snapped that Mao was a monster and demanded to know if she had even a shred of sympathy. She just pointed at the money and told him to look at it. And right there, the accountant made it crystal clear. It wasn't fancy stuff. Gold and cold hard cash were the only things that really mattered. He and Villager then scratched his head, baffled about how word spread, and told everyone that Mao was getting called his wife. She insisted she was only running the business and said the mayor had completely misread things and assumed she was Villager's wife. The Villager froze as she stepped closer and dropped the line, telling her this whole mix-up would actually help, make their connection feel way more natural, and promised she'd do anything to make her win as the next Demon Lord. She even said she'd toss every last shred of shame just for him. After she checked the ledger, she snapped that the numbers were downright terrifying, so the Villager couldn't help but wonder if a Demon Lord could even do accounting at all. She nodded, promised right then and there to be his wife, and ordered him to keep a sharp watch on every coin of the army funds. A Villager suddenly realized the whole town was being sweet to her, showering her with non-stop compliments, which left him even more stunned. Then Mao feigned a blush and thanked them with perfect manners, while the customers grilled the Villager with one question after another. So he plunged into the shop work, and Mao was practically glowing with happiness the whole time. They finished up and slammed the shop shut at 6 sharp. The Villager froze in disbelief. Somehow, in just one day, they raked in the equivalent of 5 years of income. Mao looked around and said the world finally felt peaceful, and she honestly never thought a day like this would ever arrive. She added that the Demon Lord's power ended up being a lifesaver for the villagers, and even boosted their tiny shops. She then told him straight up, even if that villager still wanted to turn her down, she'd already handled every problem he couldn't solve. She couldn't stop wondering why he hated her with such raw, burning intensity. Even most powerless souls would have lost it with joy at a gift like that. She wondered if that villager had ever been truly happy, or if every time despair hit, it only fueled the craving for more strength, and told him he didn't have to endure the pain anymore because her power could carry him. She made it crystal clear. She'd never ask him to destroy the world, but if he wanted, he could rise and become a champion of justice. He vowed to crush disasters, and in the process, chase the love and respect of people who finally started seeing him in a whole new light, something he'd never even wanted before. Then Mao spotted it. Villager had nicked her hand, and she was holding it tight like it just happened. Admitting he was jealous, and still thinking, yeah, being a champion sounds sick. It wasn't the life he ever dreamed of. He told me the guy he wanted to be wasn't flashy at all. He just threw himself into helping others, living wild on the edge. He added that she'd never get it, but deep down he liked being just a regular guy anyway. As he hurriedly tended the wound on her hand, pressing carefully to stop the pain, he confessed he wanted the hero to pay a visit to the nest. Mao shot him a deadly glare, and the villager blurted out a frantic apology, heart hammering, swearing that the shop would always back the hero. She snapped at him, calling him just some random villager, but he shot back that he wasn't backing down. He'd cling to his beliefs right up until the day he died. He snatched her hand in his, apologized again, then flat out demanded a divorce. Mouth Mole started roaring at the villager, but the villager snapped back that it was done and that the ritual had to happen. He said it just wasn't right to stay married to someone he didn't truly feel for. Marriage wasn't just romance, it was a huge decision that demanded careful thought, and Mouth Mole kept at him, still arguing. Mao shot a question at them. So you're telling me Villager doesn't love me back? The villager admitted he didn't have some grand plan. He just thought she was absolutely adorable. Mouth Mole and the villager both went wide-eyed, completely stunned. Mao suddenly broke down into loud, unstoppable tears, and the villager kept bowing and apologizing over and over again. Mao rose to her feet and snapped that nobody had ever called her cute before, that she wasn't normal. Something about her felt way too strange. And honestly, it's wild how those tiny words still managed to shake her like that. She snapped at the villager for toying with a maiden's pure heart, and she couldn't hold it back as emotion crashed over her, summoned a savage tantrum that genuinely terrified the villager. The mole at her mouth laid everything out to the villager, and the villager snapped back, just throw it away and be done with it. Mao shot Ephraim an apology, begged him to go, and admitted she'd summoned him by mistake. Then she paused. Rage exploded in Ifrit as he lunged to attack her, but Mao slammed him back, snapping, "What do you think you're doing? She's your master!" Tethered to him by the pack, Ifrit snapped back that she'd failed as the Demon Lord, like she'd just been struck by the truth. The mayor and the other villagers stared in horror, convinced this was a ticking time bomb where someone was going to get hurt. Mal begged Ephraim to stop, swearing up and down that the people there were harmless human beings who didn't deserve a single scratch. As the rage refused to fade, Ifrit grew even more vicious, teasing her as a doomed queen and ripping into her with brutal, harsh criticism. And even screamed that she should die and leave everything behind. Mouth Mole's face went pale, and he blurted out the terrifying truth. There was only one way to stop Ifrit: by unleashing a brand new beast. Next, Ifrit kept blasting Mao with furious shouts, insisting this was his golden chance to finally strike back for every old grudge, especially after she once shoved him into a binding contract. Mao suddenly realized this could be the answer, and ever since she'd woken up, she'd been ducking from everyone, disappearing like they never even mattered. She felt like she'd lost the only home she'd ever truly owned, and the thought of dying crept in like fate. She suddenly watched a villager launch himself at Ifrit, and the demon stumbled, utterly thrown off for a split moment. Next, the villager snapped, insisting, "I'm just a regular villager, nothing more." And then he called forth Leviathan to square off against Ephraim. The whole village froze in total shock, unable to wrap their heads around the fact that Mao's husband could be real, had called forth a Leviathan-like beast, one that never should have listened to him in the first place. Ifrit trembled at Leviathan's presence, and the moment their eyes met, a brutal battle ignited, because Leviathan made it painfully clear it wanted him destroyed. Mao barked at the villager, demanding to know if he was targeting her on purpose, and ordering him to stop that reckless stunt right now. The villager snapped back that he didn't care about his own life, then dropped to his knees and begged Leviathan to guard the village and Mao, even if it meant paying the price for whatever came for him next. Then Leviathan surged upward and struck so hard it wiped Ifrit clean out of existence. Villager took a hit in the chaos, but right after that, Leviathan vanished too, leaving the village chief staring in total shock, wondering out loud if the monster he just faced really was the water god. Staring at the scene, they couldn't wrap their heads around how something like that ever showed up in a beginner village. Mao sprinted over to the villager and saw he was still breathing, alive. The villager nodded that he was okay, then pressed, "What happened to Ifrit?" She shot back that Ifrit couldn't stand a chance against Leviathan, then admitted the villager had scared her for a second until relief finally hit. The villager finally let his guard down, while Mao leaned in and demanded how he could act that reckless, because unlike her, he actually could die. The villager shot back that if she died, it would be a disaster for her. "He told me he was just like his old man. No hesitation, no fear of consequences. He just barrels ahead like it's his destiny." And that was exactly why he'd launched after her the moment she plunged off that cliff. He swallowed his pride, apologized for what happened, and promised he'd be way more careful from now on. Mao told her to swallow the blame and apologize to him. The villager burst into gratitude and thanked her, and admitted that even though he didn't want power, if he didn't have it, he couldn't have punished those knights who dared to insult their village, and he swore that without taking his half-demon form, he would have been dead. Still, he dug in and swore he'd never let himself become the Demon Lord, but he swore he'd find a way to repay her for everything she'd done for him. Then he urged them to team up at the shop like regular villagers and push forward together. He floated a crazy idea. Maybe there were items out there that could shut down Demon Lord powers for good. So Mao could team up with him and keep the shop running, and he warned her not to underestimate how sharp the villagers' intel network is these days. Then he burst into laughter, straight up losing it. She couldn't stop thinking, was the villager panicking to win her over? Or was he about to slap her with even more absurd excuses for a proposal so wildly unrealistic? She said becoming the next Demon Lord was the best shot at getting her goals done for good. Then, out of nowhere, she snapped back into calm and admitted that the villager's idea actually sounded pretty hilarious. The villager nodded and straight up invited her to team up and work together. as he welcomed her into the nest. The story snapped into the royal capital, and everything felt louder the moment we arrived. Arthur, the hero, cut through the city streets like he was racing against fate, heading straight for surgery. As he headed down the street, he ran into a scared little girl who confessed she was terrified about the surgery waiting for her tomorrow, and Arthur gently told her what she could do to calm the fear. He told her, "Keep smiling, because that grin can give you the confidence and strength you need," while he was talking to her. A stranger rushed up and nudged Arthur along, and before he knew it, he stumbled into a shady pocket of whispers where people muttered about petty stuff and traded rumors under their breath. That left him totally baffled because he couldn't figure out why they expected him to answer questions like that. Either way, the whole situation felt painfully wrong, like something was about to blow up, and nobody wanted to be the one holding the match. One woman shot back bluntly that she didn't care at all that Arthur's party had saved the world. She demanded that the truth. Never let them see the truth, that the real hero is missing. The story then snapped to the villager's house, where Mao sat bolt upright and somehow fell asleep where he was. The villager rushed back and demanded to know if anyone had come in as customers. "All right, everybody, welcome, Tim!" But when he finally asked her if she'd been sleeping, she snapped with irritation and demanded to know if he seriously thought demons only lived after dark. She told him there hadn't been a single customer, so she crashed and took a nap. The villager remembered how, the last time Mao unleashed her powers and flipped that nest into a roaring shop, it instantly pulled in a massive crowd. Then, the next day hit like a storm. Refunds flooded in because customers who bought their dreams in a life without struggle suddenly crashed into buyer's remorse. Google smashed the shop's luck again, and sales crumbled, Mao said. Every last order got refunded, wiping out their profit to zero. And she warned that if this kept up, the shop would never grow and would get stuck there forever. Then she told them straight up, the only way to escape the Demon Lord's power was for the two of them to team up and figure it out together. He kicked things off by turning the nest into a famous item shop everyone knew. At the shop, the villager took it deadly seriously, insisting that if people from all over the world stepped inside, they'd stumble on rare treasures and magic forms nobody's ever seen. Mal snapped at him on the spot, yelling, "Do you have any idea how unrealistic that sounds?" The villager snapped her back to her promise and demanded, "So you're helping me, right? And tell me, don't demon lords have allies of their own?" Fuming harder by the second, Mao got cut off when Mouth Mole stepped in and said villager's argument actually made sense, then reminded him that while Mao was napping, the villagers had been out working non-stop just to scrape together whatever tiny money they could. Then the villager turned to the other monsters and demons and demanded they help clean up around the shop, thanking them from the bottom of his heart for the help. And later, while they were sitting down to eat, a villager blurted out, right there, wondering if they should risk asking the hero for help. Mao shot the idea down on the spot. Her face went painfully still, and it threw the villager completely off guard. Yet she insisted he should try writing the hero a letter because that had always been his dream, for the hero to finally visit his shop. The villager confessed that he'd already penned a stack of letters. It all came back, sealed tight and unopened, because he said the hero was treated like a saint, and some nobody villager's letter like his would never be allowed anywhere near a person like that. And he couldn't even figure out how to tell the hero what was happening to them. He grabbed Mao's hands and thanked him for jumping in to help. And she shot back that she was only doing everything she could. Mao figured the villagers would let it go. Then out of nowhere he blurted that he'd absolutely hunt down the hero and demand that. Just like that, unease crashed over her, and her mind snapped back to the time the hero crushed her, wearing that detestable, loathsome smile. Meanwhile, the villager clocked an afternoon arrival was coming, and the mouse slipped silent and deadly, deciding right then she'd never let the hero sniff out her hiding spot in that village. Right then, a pack of kids burst in with their money and begged the villager to sell them a few things. The villagers stared in disbelief, wondering where they picked up that voice, and then it clicked. Their trusty partner was the reason. The grappling hook left Mao totally baffled, so the villager grabbed her attention and explained it was a sacred village tradition, then spilled the full story behind why it was done. After a bit, Ash, out of nowhere, showed up, and the villagers looked truly thrilled, like joy had burst right out of their hearts. He pointed out that he'd been seeing Ash almost every single day lately, then grinned and asked cheerfully, like it was no big deal, what Ash wanted to buy today. Mao remembered this. Ash used to be an adventurer, but 6 months back he ditched the road and moved into the beginner village, and the mayor even handed him a tiny house on the edge of town. The catch? He reeked of alcohol all the time, and most of the women here couldn't stand him. For reasons she couldn't explain, he showed up at the shop every single day. Yeah, Mao even caught a faint ripple of mana spilling out of Ash, like Ash was quietly smothering it on purpose, trying to stay off everyone's radar. That left her staring at him, wondering who he really was underneath it all. Right then, the kids heaved the grappling hook and launched it into place. Then it rockets straight at Ash, and he calmly intercepts it with a quick swipe of a small knife. Disaster got shut down in an instant. The villager sprinted up to Ash to beg forgiveness and shoved a healing potion into his hands to treat the injury. Ash took it, slid a few coins onto the counter, and slipped out of the shop without a sound. One of the kids snapped and blamed the villager for not stopping everything sooner, and that lit a fuse. He scolded them hard and ordered them to go apologize to Ash the right way later. Mao sat there baffled. She'd even toyed with the idea that Ash might be tied to the hero, but she'd buried that suspicion so deep she never let it slip, not a single word. Then the whole vibe snapped to Ash. He showed up at his place, downed a potion, and told him it was the kind you'd spread on wounds. Healing himself straight away would have been way faster. Just as he tried to heal, the orb sitting nearby suddenly lit up, and Leela snapped through it to reach him. He demanded to know where I was right now and what I was doing. She sounded totally relieved and happy that he finally answered, then said, "Don't worry, your body doubles are still on standby." She insisted it was okay if he kept recuperating, but he had to check in with her regularly and report exactly where he was and what he was doing. When Ash stopped answering, doubt clawed at her. She had to wonder if he was even listening. Then Ash realized the truth. Arthur wasn't just a legend. He was the real hero. Turns out the character wasn't who they claimed to be, and the hero's supposed stay inside the royal capital's castle was just a cover, an outright fake. He remembered it all. He never truly craved the hero life. Deep down, he only wanted cash and fame, and that hunger is what kicked off his journey in the first place. Because he had no home, no family, nothing. There was just one shot to crush the Demon Lord, and he remembered how he'd set out with nothing but a wooden stick clenched in his hand. He dug up every brutal hardship from his journey, then relived the moment his blade finally crushed the Demon Lord. Then it hit him. Once. The king had warned him that every time he showed up for public celebrations, he had to wear a mask. And if he ever steps out in public without it, he's breaking the rules, because he can't show his face. Over time, he transformed into the perfect symbol everyone adored, with the masses praising him non-stop. They renamed him from Ash, a leftover of the Embers, to Arthur, then forced him through daily smiling training, like they were rewriting his face one day at a time, which pushed him farther and farther from the man he used to be, until Ash was barely recognizable, and eventually he broke away for good. One day, he just crashed, falling deep into depression. One of his own companions snatched a letter meant for him, while the king secretly kept it locked away. With his friends backing him up, he slipped into Binya village in secret to recover and heal, and later he realized 6 whole months had gone by. But that calm, slow life in the village was starting to fall apart fast. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. How did the Demon Lord even come back to life? And he couldn't stop wondering if she was about to claim the whole place like her new castle. Plus, he was really hoping the owner wouldn't be furious at him if he accidentally wrecked a few things. He admitted he'd snapped out of his own thoughts mid-sentence because he was chopping an onion, straight up making his eyes sting and water, then insisted you've got to slice carefully near the roots if you don't want those tears to hit. Leela then grilled him about life in the village, and her voice lit up like she genuinely loved hearing it had been quiet. Then she added that she'd heard a few rumors. But they said a brand new Demon Lord showing up in that corner was nearly impossible, Yet weird, unheard-of events still slammed into the world for reasons nobody could predict. She told Arthur to reach out to them the second he needed help or the moment the Demon Lord showed up. So Arthur nodded, agreed fast, and then the connection got cut. After everything, Arthur finally realized the truth. He'd already fallen head over heels for the Demon Lord long before it all clicked. He didn't have a clue why she'd slipped into a little girl's form, but the second he laid eyes on her, he instantly recognized her. He still remembered the instant he watched her brought low, and his heart shattered so hard he fell headfirst into hopeless love. His mind snapped back to 10 years ago, when he finally saw her crumple to the ground, tears streaming down her face. And just like that sight lit up his chest with a wild rush of euphoria. Then he realized that spark had hit him hard, and that he'd been in love with her ever since that exact moment. Then it hit him. How the Demon Lord had already handled his wounds back in the shop. It was something he'd never even dreamed could happen. Because once you realize heroes and demons are just two faces of the same coin, you start to see that they don't have to be locked in forever, non-stop war. Then his thoughts finally snapped into focus. Rebellion, revolution, and a future where his actions could wrench the world into something new. In the end, he clenched his boost and swore he'd be the first hero to land a happy ending, even while standing beside the Demon Lord. And now, he couldn't stop asking himself what his next move should be, because he already had money, fame, and everything he once begged for. Then the mayor stormed up to Ash's door and told him straight he'd come to deliver the community bulletin board notices. Mahi leaned in and asked how life had treated Ash in the village and if he needed anything at all. Ash broke into heartfelt gratitude, saying he was genuinely thankful that the villagers welcomed him warmly, even though they had no idea what happened in his past. He admitted that more than 10 years had passed, and travelers had been rolling in and out non-stop ever since, so he'd just learned to live with the chaos. Ash dove into all kinds of village drama, and that's when he brought up Mao, fresh off his arrival. Villager couldn't believe it. How on earth did Mao land a job at the item shop? The mayor's jaw dropped, and he straight up asked Ash if he really didn't know that Villager and Mao are married. That bombshell hit Ash like lightning, pure shock, while Villager seethed, still furious at that demon that bolted and never came back. And then, suddenly, a slime burst into view, and pure panic exploded across the scene. He broke into a rush and spilled every detail to Mouthmole, and the second Mouthmole heard it all, he went totally stunned, and shot the news to Mao right away. And the hero was racing straight into their territory. The moment they heard the news, both of them froze in stunned silence. Mouthmole kept going, saying the hero was already living in a tiny house just outside the village, and he demanded to know the exact moment the slime said the hero had arrived. When the villager finally heard the hero was coming at last, their heart just broke open with emotion, thinking her long-cherished dream was finally about to break through. Mouthmole got fresh intel in no time, and it hit like a punch. The so-called hero was coming to kill the villager. When Villager heard that, shock ripped straight through him. Then the spotlight snapped to Arthur. The hero was sharpening his dagger with deadly focus, and he swore he was coming for Villager next, determined to keep the Demon Lord out of her hands, replacing her himself and taking her place. By the very next morning, everything had already changed. Villager and Mao were still shaking with pure terror, huddled under the table, while Villager clutched the flag so hard it stuck out beside her. Mao confessed she'd been secretly relieved Arthur, the hero, never attacked them the night before. She was relieved that the villager was still safe, but she snapped that they couldn't keep hiding forever. Monsters were already sweeping the area around the shop, and she pushed the villager to finally get some sleep. Mao then blurted out that fear slammed into her when she finally understood. Ash, the man she knew, was actually the hero. The villager swore the hero had been showing up at their shop every single week for the last 6 months, snapping up all kinds of goods like clockwork. He confessed that his heart had been pounding ever since he discovered the truth, and that the fear flooding him was real. Mouthmole frowned and said he didn't know if they could really trust that slime. Yet if the info was true, he couldn't wrap his head around why the hero would even want Villager dead. Mao took one look at it and snapped. There's only one answer. Someone must have spotted the villager and realized he's the demon lord who's still alive. Then she added, and the hero already knows about villager, plus Mao and how you're tied to him. He set his sights on the villager because in her eyes, the hero's mission was crystal clear. Kill them all and wipe the demon taint from the world. And when she heard that, the villager crumpled into tears and blurted out that she'd had enough. She shot back that it was all just wild speculation and that they had zero clue why the hero was really coming for her. While they were still bickering, Arthur suddenly pounded on the door. Power. He smiled politely and asked them to unlock it, insisting all he wanted was a simple talk, while the villager froze, clueless about what Ash could possibly be plotting to discuss. But eventually let him in, and Arthur snapped that the villagers had gotten a nasty idea of him, so it was his cue to hunt down a job. He showed up looking like a whole different person from the one they'd seen the day before, and that mismatch instantly made them suspicious of what he was really after. A villager tiptoed up and whispered that the shop was barely scraping by, that they couldn't pay Arthur properly, and that he should look for another job somewhere around the village. Arthur. He finally lays it out. He didn't just want a job at their shop, he specifically came for that place. Because those halls were packed with memories for him. He told me he'd been shopping there nearly 10 years ago. And then he dropped the real bombshell. He used to be an adventurer, raring to tear down the demon lord. The villager played dumb like he had no clue. Arthur pushed on, explaining that even though it had already happened, the last shopkeeper was insanely kind. Back when he had 0 coins to his name, that person handed him everything he needed for the road. No payment at all. Mao's worry flashed across his face as he stared at the villager, who wore the same stunned look of someone who'd never heard a word of this. Arthur then leaned in and asked, "So, isn't it finally my turn to repay that kindness?" And he even said he wouldn't mind working in that shop for free at all. The villager threw him an apologetic look and insisted they already had more than enough help, straight up trying to shut him down. Arthur swore that if that shop hadn't existed, he'd never even started his journey in the first place, and he refused to just sit there and watch an honorable item shop get wiped out. He begged them to let him help and guard the shop, and the villager was left torn up inside. Something felt off in the hero's act, and the moment Arthur made his intentions clear, he was hunting for help. Everything hit him at once, crushing him with overwhelm. The villager finally snapped, burst into tears, and agreed on the spot to hire Arthur to work in the shop. That choice left Mouthmole and Mao reeling with pure shock, and the villager immediately pushed for Arthur to get shown the ropes so he could finally learn how the shop really ran. Mao was terrified by what was happening, and she was certain Arthur would soon rally his allies and come for them. Mouthmole snapped them to stay sharp. Watch Arthur like a hawk first, read his real plan, and move from there meanwhile. Arthur couldn't help but think Mao looked oddly cute when she got scared of him, right after the villager asked, "Is something wrong?" Arthur just shrugged and said he wasn't doing anything special, he was having a blast. The villager slowly started to forget that Arthur was the same man who'd come to end his life, and then, weirdly, he couldn't stop feeling happy, working right beside the hero while Mao just hovered nearby, watching. Then they huddled up and started brewing a health potion together, while the villager kicked things off by laying out the simplest level 1 potion recipe imaginable. Arthur spilled the herbs he'd scavenged on his journey and told the villagers, "Go on, inspect everything," then offered them full access. He was genuinely stunned and blurted out that he'd never run into so many of those plants before. Arthur realized that the bag was packed with rare herbs no level 1 village item shop would ever carry. Stuff so unusual it came with mild poison in it. One wrong touch could hit like a punch, so the villager snapped on rubber gloves right away and started sorting the herbs with careful hands. Sorting them into 3 piles, safe, dangerous, and poisonous. Arthur shot up in surprise and demanded if the villager had ever seen herbs like these, only for the villager to admit it was his very first time. But he swore to Arthur he could still use even the rarest herbs the right way. And then he showed off his secret, an old book that helped him read what each herb could do. Arthur said the villager studies like it's his whole life. And that villager, all choked up, thanked him from the heart for the compliment as he flipped through the book. The moment he spotted the mandrake, shock hit him like lightning, and he hucked it aside on instinct. Arthur first thought Villager was pulling his second trick. He was banking on the mandrake to start crying, so both of them would have looked totally ridiculous, especially Villager standing right in front of Mao. His plan crashed again, because another mandrake was lurking nearby, and the two mandrakes immediately found each other and latched on tight, like they were hugging for dear life. The villager froze in shock, then blurted out, "Are these two mandrakes brothers?" Arthur shot him a shocked look and demanded to know how the villager could even understand them. Then, the villager translated their voices, choked up as he said the mandrakes were thanking the hero for bringing the two brothers back together. Everyone froze in shock when the villager bluntly called Arthur the hero right out loud. Arthur Frost sat there, stunned. Ever since, when had that villager known the truth about his identity? And the moment it hit, he instinctively stumbled back, like his body was trying to escape what he just realized. And his fingertips brushed those deadly herbs, like touching trouble with his bare skin. A fiery sting suddenly ripped across his skin. The villager snapped and pointed it out. Arthur froze, because he was the one who had stuffed those herbs into the pouch himself. And the villager insisted they had to treat the injury right now, and told Arthur to take a seat while he stepped in and handled everything. He insisted that if Arthur got hurt on the job, it would be on him because he ran the shop as its manager. So they had no choice. Arthur's wounds had to be tended right away, and the villager gently bandaged his hand. And he poured out real gratitude to him, thanking him for coming back with Shallow Man's root. Arthur finally snapped and told the villager, "Forget Ash. Call me the hero from now on." At the same time, he couldn't help but wonder, what kind of man could the Demon Lord possibly fall for? As soon as the villager heard Arthur's words, Mao shot between them and begged him not to kill the villager. She told me straight up that because of what happened, she'd been left in the villager's hands for now, and she had zero plans to fight humans. She finally confessed the demon army was already crushed, and warned that if the hero truly believed, then he had to wipe out the final boss for good. The Demon Lord, so he could do whatever he wanted with her, but the villagers had to stay out of it. Suddenly, emotion slammed into her, and she whipped around to kick Arthur. She felt a chilling aura flood through her in an instant, and even the villager who rushed to calm her couldn't stop it. The villager grabbed her by the nerves and told her to breathe. This was a level 1 village item shop, not some final war zone where everything turns into a battlefield. Arthur then admitted he'd come here looking to start a fight, ready to rip both of them apart. He couldn't wrap his head around it. What kind of insane turn of events dragged the Demon Lord into an ordinary village shopkeeper's life? Mao shot back at him, saying he had zero right to butt into their relationship. Arthur couldn't help blurting out, "Do you really think the Demon Lord loves that villager this much?" She snapped that it was Villager who'd offered up his own body to her, and Villager shot back fast, saying they'd all gotten the story wrong and nobody was on the same page. Arthur's calm shattered in an instant. Tears poured as he admitted he felt like he'd lost to nothing more than a village boy. Then he leaned in and asked Mao straight out, was she really, truly happy? She answered straight up. After the hero crushed her, she'd watched most of her servants vanish. But that heartbreak cracked her open, and suddenly she felt emotions her old self never even dared to imagine. She admitted that no matter what came crashing down, she'd never felt this calm, this peaceful, like she did right now. Now, Arthur realized it all came down to Villager. He finally saw the truth. He'd already tried, and he refused to let them slip away like nothing happened. He admitted to himself, yeah, deep down, he wanted the same thing. Real happiness. Arthur doubled down, saying that even if the world shunned them forever, he was still going to spend all of eternity wrapped around Mao. He finally confessed that he'd once murdered her, and that, at the very least, their souls could stay side by side for the rest of eternity. Hearing that, Mao and the villager froze in shock, because the truth hit them like a punch. Arthur really had slipped to the dark side. At the same time, the story swung over to three kids scrambling through the rocks, firing a grappling hook they'd snagged from the villager's shop, while two of them kept yelling, begging to head back because a thunderstorm was rolling in. But Teller wouldn't hear a word. He just kept on playing, and then, out of nowhere, the rocks started collapsing right there. A panicked man rushed into the village and blurted out, "Hey, have you seen Teller?" A villager swore they'd never seen him and snapped, "Stop hunting answers. Save the kids first." Right then, a deafening rumble crashed through the air, and the villager snapped that it was rocks tearing loose and plummeting down. Panic rippled through everyone, and Arthur suddenly tore toward the scene. Late on, people clustered by the rocks and muttered that Teller and the other kids had been warned, again and again, not to mess around there, yet they kept brushing off every warning. They also said the place had been hunted, top to bottom, except for one spot, underneath the fallen rocks. When they heard that, Arthur bolted over and started digging around like he'd lost his mind, leaving everyone staring in stunned silence at what he did. Against all odds, he ripped the kids to safety. Teller sobbed as he kept apologizing again and again, then grabbed his hands and thanked him over and over for saving his life. As Arthur hauled them up, fresh rocks started raining down, and everyone screamed for him to back off right now. He shoved the kits toward her and got crushed hard between the rocks. Then it hit them. He was just 27 years old. Pinned in place and unable to move, he finally understood he didn't have to keep up the good guy act anymore, because deep down, he was really Ash, not Arthur. His legs were already shattered, and in his last breath, he was buried alive under a mountain of crushing rock. He knew that if he went all in and got serious, his power would let him blast a path straight out. But he knew if he used his power, it would shatter the heroic image everyone worshipped and leave everyone heartbroken. So he stayed quiet under the rubble, clutching the villagers' words about shielding the hero's image, because in his mind, he was nothing but trash. And still, he'd saved the world and brought peace. So now it was on him to protect that heroic image, no matter what. He was convinced, if the real, truly good hero had stepped in, nobody would have had to bleed and suffer just to keep that dream alive. He finally felt pure, soul-deep gratitude, because in the end, he managed to save them. Then, out of nowhere, his thoughts burned to ash. He spotted a faint glow in the dark, and the second he did, he knew it was a village. Saul rushed in to save Arthur, shouting, "Ash!" But Ash froze in place, hesitating hard. Sensing the villager was acting like a full-blown demon right now, he froze in even bigger disbelief when he realized the golem had shown up too. Still stunned that a monster would risk everything to guard a human, a brutal fight erupts, and the villager yells at him to shut up before he patches his wounds. Villager pushed forward toward the hero, closing in fast, while the hero stood there totally baffled, unable to make sense of why he was doing all of it. Then a villager leaned in and asked Ash if he was disappointed. He even planted a flag out front and scribbled letters to the hero. Only to get blindsided, those letters somehow really made it to him. Ash snapped back that he only tried to steal the Demon Lord because he fell head over heels for her, then grimly admitted he'd tortured helpless villagers billions of times weaker than him just to make it happen. And he'd shattered what the villagers expected. Yet somehow, villagers still looked relieved, and that made no sense to him as he kept asking why. "Yeah," the villager shot back, "Ash could never really let me down." He told them, the one he and his father had been waiting for. He wasn't some flawless hero, just a broke, beaten customer who once stood outside the shop with only a wooden stick to fight with. And when he heard this, both of them shattered into tears, and Mao froze in shock at what he just saw. Mouthhole swore they looked fine, then couldn't figure out why they didn't come back. Just then the mayor burst in, shouting that he'd protect the villager, and the villager calmly warned him not to because the mayor could end up getting hurt instead. At last, a villager snapped to their feet and told Ash to get out, right now. He made it crystal clear. Ash still hadn't paid back for the free stuff he grabbed 12 years ago. A monstrous rock was seconds away from crushing a villager in Ash. Ash suddenly yanked out a stick, slammed it into place to channel his power, and blasted the stone apart mid-swing. He told me that he once believed the villager was as gentle as his father, until he finally saw the truth. This guy was way sharper than he ever let on. He promised he'd never let the villager down, no matter what. The story snapped over to the nearby town of Numbatwup, where a huge crowd packed in tight, desperate to find out if the guy standing in the middle was the real hero. Alice hurried over, brimming with curiosity, and shouted at the hero Arthur, "It's you, right?" Arthur faced the crowd with a warm smile, and they welcomed him like a hero. Then he urged everyone to swing by the item shop in the beginner village and even put his stamp on it in public, only for a villager to rush in and warn him, "Don't step on the merchandise!" When Elish scanned the hero card, she snapped and declared, "Arthur's a fake hero!" Arthur calmly said the official hero had a look-alike and pointed out that it was him, and then introduced himself. "I'm Ash." He admits the look-alike can't match the real hero's power, but he's still got sword skills that can't be ignored. Yelling to the villager, Ash demanded a live demonstration. A bunch of villagers started lobbing balls into the air, and Ash burst forward, slicing through every single one like a blur, cracking each ball clean in half. The crowd stood there in stunned silence, staring at the spectacle in disbelief. Ash then declared, "For my payment, I only want one thing. Every single one of you has to buy at least one healing potion." Ilish clocked it immediately and snapped at the villager for peddling stuff, hiding behind a fake hero look-alike to rake in customers. Suddenly, Ash closed the distance, tilted her chin up with gentle hands, and commanded her to lock eyes with him. He said his presence was so blinding she'd be the one forced to look away, and Elish's composure instantly crumpled into flustered panic. She tried to steady her breathing by clinging to one truth. He was just a fake. While Ash kept going, flashing off multiple magic types, even unleashing fire spells. From far away, Mao watched the whole scene unfold, and irritation kept climbing higher and higher in his chest. When they finally came back, the villager practically glowed with joy at how well the sales were going. Ash openly claimed all the success was because of him, then stayed ice calm as he told the villager to bow before him. That annoyed Mao like crazy, and the two snapped and squabbled again until Ash dropped the bombshell. He still owed the shop money from 12 years ago, and he was planning to pay it back by working off his debt, including the items he'd just grabbed. Mao told him he could settle it all in seconds, just a few coins, and it was done. Afterward, the villager looked back and realized his shop used to be tiny, yet in town he'd bragged it was the very first place the hero stopped at when his journey began. And then, everything went quiet, like that "however" was about to explode. Once the Demon Lord finally crumpled and peace swept the world, monster raids vanished, so his shop teetered on the edge of closing for good. Nobody saw it coming. After all those wild, extraordinary twists, the former Demon Lord and the hero wound up punching the same clock in the same shop. A villager snapped that nobody realized Ash was the real hero. Then the hero shot back that the older folks were basically just rookies with more experience. And isn't it wild how he looked like a flawless hero to everyone? Yet his mask stayed in the shadows, and somehow that same mask ended up doing him a ton of good. It made one thing crystal clear. The world's perfect hero is nothing like the real deal. Mao and Ash started up a fresh argument again, trading jabs as they teased each other about their names. While the villagers' irritation kept rising, fueled by every one of their antics. Ash said they were still trying to strip the Demon Lord's power the safest way they could. No shortcuts, just pure caution and grit. He said that, yeah, the villager was a hero, but he still had no clue how to pull it off. And even so, both of them swore they'd figure it out themselves, step by step, until the answer finally showed up. Then he blurted out, half in awe and half in fear, would they actually track down another human and pass those powers on, turning him into the next Demon Lord? Mal jabbed a finger at the villager and declared, "I'm the new Demon Lord. She's the one who used to be." The villager shot back and denied it right away. He shot back, swearing he hadn't become a Demon Lord yet. Ash slammed them with the warning, said Villager had already blown his powers twice, and demanded to know why he thought everything was still going to work out, then pushed him to convince everyone that, at the beginner level, no Demon Lord was ever going to show up. The Villager looked totally baffled and asked what Ash was even getting at. So Ash laid it out fast. The safest move for both of them was for the hero to stick close, eyes on them the whole time. Mao snapped that she didn't need a single ounce of his help, while Ash grinned and kept needling her. He could even demand a Demon Lord as his next reward just to savor their tears for the rest of eternity. Mao whipped around to the Villager and declared that Ash had finally slipped up and shown his real face. Then Ash fired back, demanding why she reacted that way. While the Villager begged Mao to cool off, he insisted that Ash's help was totally fine. Mao sucked in a breath, steadied her nerves, and snapped, "Why are you doing this?" Because Ash was the same guy who'd beaten her for fame and glory. Ash grinned and said it was just plain fun to stay right next to her like that. Right then, Mouthmole burst in from outside, shouting that something was terribly wrong. Bandits had them boxed in on every side. He told me the bandits' newest target was a villager selling elixirs for dirt cheap. Mouthmole straight up said that at first, the bandits didn't even realize they pulled in paying customers. Because they were strapped with weapons, the bandits told everyone straight up their boss wanted those elixirs and he demanded the villagers hand them over for free. Villager's stomach dropped. Bandits had never picked on him before, but he forced himself to breathe easy, because surely a hero would handle this. And a Demon Lord stood right beside him, yet everyone grudgingly nodded and agreed. But before they could breathe, everything flipped on them. Suddenly, they were all bound tight, and the bandits dragged them to their base, staring at the villager's elixir like they'd just seen magic. The villager couldn't stop asking, why on earth did the hero and the Demon Lord let this happen? Mao said they could have fought back just as easily, and claimed Villager would have ended it without breaking a sweat, then mocked him for treating that obvious win like it was some kind of threat. The Villager snapped back, saying, "Sure, I'm weaker now, but I'm still the Demon Lord." And Mao fired back, "Nah, you're on a whole different scale than those bandits." Ash warned them that if they lost control, the bandits would get obliterated. Then he added that those guys would have dropped dead from one single punch. Mao then pressed Villager hard, asking why he never called the monster conductor, because one summon could have ripped every monster in the area into the fight and scattered the bandits for good. The Villager snapped to his senses and blurted out that he'd totally forgotten that option, and that's when Ash stepped in and told him, "We're on the main road. And if anyone stirred up trouble in there, the shop owner would have been forced to slap a whole new name on it." Plus, he made it clear that Villager couldn't just flex his real power in the open, especially since he was only pretending to be a hero's lookalike. The mouthhole idea made it clear. The safest play was to slip out quietly, then tell everyone he'd forge an escape route. Just when he was about to keep going, a villager slammed into his path and stopped him cold. He warned them that even if they slipped away, the bandits would just pick up and roll right on, hitting a bigger village next. And he refused to let innocent people get hurt. Mao stared at him like he'd just told a lie, and she couldn't shake the fear. Who was actually going to stop those bandits? So he made it clear no one else was going to step in and do justice for him. She reminded him that she and Ash had dedicated their whole lives to fighting for the justice they believed in, and she pointed out that Villager chose this kind of responsibility. The bandits came back grinning and swore the elixirs worked for real. They said it was time to test the purchase right now, and then made it crystal clear that it was the shopkeeper's job to guarantee the quality was legit. As they spoke, they locked onto Mao's blazing golden eyes. And now he couldn't stop wondering if she was really a demon. Then again, everyone insisted no demons ever showed up in this area, and Ash finally felt the farce had stretched way past its welcome. And he finally snapped. This was the moment to act. Right then, the villager snapped upright and boldly announced, "I'm the manager." So he told the bandits to take him on themselves and leave his employees out of it. The bandits yanked him into the dark and laughed as if blood was seconds away, and Ash couldn't believe they'd pushed it too far by provoking the villager. He clocked the look on Mao's face, and unease crawled up his spine. Realizing a simple scratch wouldn't cut it, he saw the bandits plan to slice the villager until he was teetering on death. Right after that, the bandit leader rolled in and declared he'd personally put Villager through the test. The villager tried to calm his nerves, sure Mao's elixir would hit the mark and that the agony would fade before long. And he reminded himself, since he was half demon, he could heal way faster than any normal person. As he measured the fallout, the bandit boss snapped, "This is the real deal," and he insisted there's no way Villager would have agreed to get cut if it wasn't. Then he barked an order. His men were to kill the other two. After they'd already seen the band's power, they figured one survivor was all it took to keep the elixirs flowing. The villager realized the other two weren't the kind you could just steamroll. Those guys crushed bandits with zero effort. He remembered how they'd poured their whole lives into defending the very justice they swore was right. He spun around to face them, and the villager figured they'd rescue him right on the spot. Because they were the Demon Lord and the hero, the two mightiest forces in the entire world. Then it hit him. Those two weren't just nearby anymore. They'd fully slipped into the nest. Ash and Mao were the ones standing there. And yep, he was their manager himself. With that resolve blazing, the villager lunged in and swung for the bandit leader's head. But the leader snapped back with a brutal kick, bellowing a warning not to throw his life away as he braced to strike again. The villager figured he just had to stand guard. Then, out of nowhere, a whole swarm of flies exploded into the air and filled the area. Ash and Mao burst in and demanded, without a hint of hesitation, that their manager be returned. Ash told the villager to relax, saying the bandits' underlings were already taken out. Rage thundered in the bandit leader's chest as he lunged ahead, screaming that this humiliation was beyond what he could take. Especially because, back when it mattered most, he'd actually been on a guild team once before. Ash slapped the air with a mocking clap and sneered that the bandit leader had never once thought to turn all that effort and talent toward something useful, right now. A wild boar bulldozed straight at them, but the second Ash and Mao locked eyes and glared, terror hit it hard, and it spun around and bolted back. He spun around and barreled straight toward the villagers. The villager snapped his hand out and redirected the boar like it was nothing. He slammed into the bandit leader so hard that the leader staggered, stunned that something like that could even happen. Blood wiped from his face, the villager snapped that the nest would keep feeding customers with top-notch merchandise priced fair and clean. They made it crystal clear, in no uncertain terms, that they wouldn't tolerate the resale of any of their products. The bandit leader bolted for the exit, trying to escape before anyone could stop him. But the villager hurled his grappling hook and swore he'd make sure the guy couldn't get away. He grabbed the leader, hauled him in, and dragged him right back. No escape. The bandits were grabbed, yanked in, and hauled straight to the second town. Then the villager and the other two rip off back to their village, leaving everything behind. They felt a rush of relief as they delivered the criminals to the authorities and wrapped it up for good. No more chaos, no more trouble. Right after that, the villager was left reeling when he abruptly transformed right in front of their eyes, close enough that the shock hit instantly. Ash praised him, saying that villager had lunged straight into danger to shield his employees and even marched up to the bandit leader all by himself. The villager snapped back that he still had a ton to think through and a lot more to figure out. He straight up admitted there were tons of things he still had to level up, and he owned up to that truth. That he had zero business being a manager if he just bulldozed everyone with his ideas and made others do his work for him. He told them that the two of them had really shown him what it means to be a manager, and he thanked them from the bottom of his heart. Mouthhole blurted out, "Why the heck have you two never told the villager the truth about how you let the bandits grab you on purpose?" The villager froze in shock and demanded to know if they truly meant to hold those powers back, as he just watched them wrestle control of their own body. They hesitated for a second, then finally admitted it had been ages since anything like that went down. So yeah, they thought it'd be a blast. They also pointed out that Mao had never once been attacked by bandits before, and that was exactly why her curiosity was burning hot. The villagers stared in disbelief at their cheap excuse, and then Ash snapped that he'd meant to haul the bandits in for real. He just needed to find their base first. Mao told her straight, She knew the villager was still weak, so she'd backed off and left the fight to him. Then she hit him with the truth that he'd once again charged in recklessly. They both grabbed the glory for helping that villager grow through the whole experience. Villager shoved them off onto the road, insisting they come back once the last of the goods were sold. And as they split, Orash growled that they better stop with the pranks on Villager. Then the story flips to Darford's Entertainment City, where a high-stakes betting event is already in full swing. He slammed his bet on racer number 10, the third favorite, Shadow Wolf. The crowd around them gasped at what they just heard. Some even swore it sounded like a hero's gamble. And then, the moment everyone saw that shimmering bicorn, it was obvious. Soon every racer piled up at the starting gate. And then, right on cue, the race erupted into motion. Villager and Mao stood shoulder to shoulder with the race announcer, staring at the competition, so the announcer couldn't help blurting out if they were actually buzzing with excitement. Then he leaned in, grabbed your attention, and started breaking down every wild detail of the race. A stunned Villager blinked in disbelief when he learned the announcer wasn't just some legend of the road. He was also running a business, like a pro. The man leaned in and said, "People call it the entertainment city now, but 10 years ago, it was totally empty, like nobody had ever shown up." After they lost their way to earn a living, those once proud adventurers and mercenaries drifted straight into the city, and with nothing left to do, their monster partners didn't know what to make of it either, so boredom turned into a gamble. Monster races. Soon the crowd showed up, and before long, those races became the city's biggest obsession. The villager went pale at the bombshell, and he could see Mao's fury climbing by the second. He realized it crushed her to watch humans treat monsters like nothing more than toys. Mao screamed, grilling them to see if that was truly the fastest they could run, then pushed them to unleash their inner strength, because the second they sensed the Demon Lord standing before them, every monster trembled with pure terror. He pushed the villager to finally catch on that maybe he'd been overthinking the whole thing. A villager spotted a woman shrieking at a shimmering bicorn. She kept pushing it to fold because she'd already sunk a whopping 500,000 on Shadow Wolf. Hearing her say that, the villager's jaw dropped in pure disbelief. Everything hung in the air like the moment before a storm. Just when the race was about to end, a tree monster suddenly exploded forward in one brutal burst, leaving everyone staring in total disbelief. Ash barked at the villager, basically yelling, "If you can bend any monster to your will, then do it, right now." The villager shot back, "I can't do that. We're here to carry out our assigned job, that's it." The owner chuckled and declared that chaos was the spark that made the monster race worth watching, then grinned and said he'd show them exactly where the injured creatures were kept. As they pressed forward, they stumbled right into a Pegasus. A man told him the Pegasus usually needs a whole month to recover, but with that elixir, it's cured in the blink of an eye, proving just how insanely powerful it is. The man bowed to the villager and demanded to know how he could ever repay him, and the villager said money would do just fine. Meanwhile, Mao kept staring at the Pegasus with black stripes, whispering that this one was brutally rare. The man kept on laying it all out, and then dropped the bombshell. Turns out the owner's partner used to be an adventurer, and now they were finally ready to jump back into the race. Suddenly, the Pegasus started wreaking havoc all around, and just like that, a South villager snapped at it. Then it calmed down almost immediately. And just like that, the whole place went silent. Everyone stared in disbelief, begging to know who the villager really was. Ash jabbed a finger at the villager and declared, "That right there, he's a tamer." Ash leaned in and asked if he was really sure about letting them race, because the man said that monster had been acting weird for a while and even started ignoring his orders sometimes. They raged out of control, and then someone called out the brutal truth. Those wounds were self-inflicted. And that was the first time they'd ever acted like this. Then the man snapped, asking Villager to be the monster's tamer, claiming Zerbasis would finally calm down and run right under his control. Until Villager. The man started crunching the numbers on the spot, laying out exactly how much a tamer could rake in during a full year. And Villager's jaw dropped in real amazement. Then, the man threw in the kicker. Villager would even get a contract from him to regularly buy elixirs, and Ash and Mao practically lit up because Villager was finally going to earn money. Right then, an old lady swept in and declared she'd come all this way just to see Zerbasis. The shop owner nodded, then waved the villager over as the new tamer and asked if they could say his job title properly. The old lady's eyes snapped to the elixir, then she read the label. Nest. And couldn't believe it was still running and in business. The villager Mao and Ash stared at her in total confusion. She said it had been ages since she last saw Villager, and the last time was at the funeral for Villager's father. Then she leaned in and introduced herself, judge of the Item Shop Quality Board for the Worldwide Item Association, Symmetry, and asked if she could grab a few minutes with the villager. The villager froze in shock and blurted, "Granny!" leaving Mao and Ash totally baffled. As they slid into their seats, Symmetry stopped him cold and told him not to call her that because it fooled people and sent the wrong message. Then she made it clear. She'd poured everything she had straight into her work. And still stayed single, apologized first. Then the villager threw an apology right back, saying it was nothing more than a bad habit. But then a shock hit the villager. She realized she'd also been the official judge watching over Nest during his father's reign. When Ash pressed her about Nest's rating, she snapped that every item shop worldwide had to get certified through her association first. She admitted it was a mere 0.5 out of 10, leaving the whole crowd utterly stunned. So she said the shop's rank decided what it could sell, then laid out the whole mess of rules, terms, conditions, the works. The shop's unnecessary red tape had always been treated like a rule written in stone. That's why the healing items turned out differently once Symmetry cracked it. She saw that only shops rated over 9 stars were allowed to compound elixirs. At that shocking revelation, the villager broke into heavy sweat. He'd completely forgotten the rule. Mao and Ash locked eyes on him, glaring hard as the Symmetry kept marching on. The villager had bled customers for years. The shop got 0 new reviews, and the association basically erased the store from its memory. Now they've got to rebuild the whole way they rate places. The villager crumpled on the spot, and Ash shot over to check him. Now I'm telling him to get some rest. Symmetry leaned in and revealed that the elixir broke the association rules. Even though the elixir's sales looked strong at first, every last bottle got yanked back and refunded. Yet she said one customer had already used an elixir that had been sold. Because of that breach, everything at Nest was shut down for the next 30 years. No exceptions. The Racing Grounds shop owner stepped in, swore that Villager hadn't been selling fake elixirs, and thanked him straight to his face. Symmetry shot back that underpricing rare items didn't automatically make a shop good. The real test was whether they could strike the right balance between fair prices and happy customers. She told him she couldn't excuse Villager's father for brushing off profit, but she'd still give him credit for his honest, hard work to please every customer. And that effort even earned the shop a 3-star rating. Yet Villager threw it all away within 10 years and crushed the success his father fought to build. She said the association's rules demanded the shop be shut down already. Suddenly, Mao lunged forward to strike her. Symmetry snapped, stopped calling her a violent woman, and shoved her back. She warned it could have turned deadly. Mao might have even stabbed her straight through the eyes. And then she smirked, saying, "Sure, I'd still be fine. I'd get healed with some elixir anyway." So Mao might as well have plucked out an eye or two, because he somehow couldn't see what one kid endured for 10 long years just trying to keep a failing item shop alive. Ash stepped up, brushed off Mao's outburst, and told Symmetry that the exact same hard scrutiny would be coming for her, too. He insisted that if those regular checks still missed that the elixirs were being sold legit, it would paint a brutal picture of her judgment, and that alone proved Nest was nothing like the shop it used to be a decade ago. He urged her to push forward with her assessment and give them a shot to prove that Nest was worthy of selling elixirs. The villager's nerves snapped tight as Symmetry declared the elixirs weren't fake, and that only made everything feel even more suspicious, especially with the kind of shop Nest had turned into. She told Villager, "If you can prove yourself to me, I'll own up for the association's blunder and I'll lift the ban." Just as relief started to creep over Villager's face, She snapped that if he messed up, the shop would be shut down for a solid 30 years. No exceptions. The villager nodded at the condition. Then, finally, Symmetry locked its gaze on the flag blazing atop the watchtower, and he ordered the villagers to keep every customer happy at the racecourse. No elixirs, just straight-up service. Hours dragged by, and still, Villager felt like that assignment was outright impossible. And way past anything an item shop could ever pull off for real, Ash kept pushing him, begging him to just go through with it. They kept arguing, insisting that even if they took this loss, it wouldn't be the end. Villager needed to lock in and start raising funds because Symmetry never banned changing course or launching a whole new business. They just have to tear it all down and rebuild from the very beginning with Nest. Villager was fuming. He'd lost yet another bet, and it stung so bad he was close to tears. And yeah, this wasn't the moment for messing around with monster races, so Mao snapped at Villager not to bank on that total idiot Ash. He said he'd always been that way, even back when people still called him a hero. She said the one thing he could do better than anyone was his non-stop macho talk. And yeah, he could whip courage out of everyone around him, but he didn't care about any of it unless it turned into a real challenge or a game. Mao blurts out, almost like a dare, "Who is that woman really?" Even knowing she might have gotten weaker, the woman still managed to slam the door on the surprise attack like it never stood a chance. Ash snapped that if Symmetry claimed to run the item shop quality board, she sure didn't act like it. She looked like she'd survived a couple battles. It found out the board had a brutal rule. Every member had to race across the whole world to inspect item shops, no matter how deadly the journey got. Even with a shop sitting right in front of the Demon Lord's army, a board member still had to march up in person and size the place up with their own eyes. They said the judges handed out those brutal trials were monsters in their own right, so powerful they could take on the final dungeon and even march into the Demon Lord's stronghold, where the Demon Lords keep ruling from. Ash and Mao froze in disbelief at that, and Ash blurted out that it was insane. How could warriors this deadly be taking orders for the item shop board? Meanwhile, the owner of that race's shop leaned in, firing questions at Cemetery, like, was she really being too harsh on the Nest item shop? She said Cemetery had always been determined to back Villager the moment he started getting slammed by those tough times. And she even threw in a massive donation while he was building that racetrack. The Cemetery snapped back that Nest had broken the rules, and punishment was the only thing that made sense. She asked, "What would you do if you saw someone sprinting straight toward a cliff?" She told me she kept roaming the world to judge every item shop she could find, even after the Demon Lord was finally gone. She'd sworn it was her job to back item shops that couldn't survive on their own. Still, she insisted that even if she warned Villager a cliff was waiting ahead, he'd grin and sprint straight into the fall. She figured it was kinder to crush his hopes now, before he ever had a chance to regret it later. And Great started to wonder if she had never meant to admit that shot from the start, and if she'd been carrying a grudge against them the whole time. Symmetry flat out refused, and right at that moment, a stranger burst in and said they'd just gotten crushing news about Sabrasis, though right after that, things were about to twist. Villager and Ash sprinted into town and grabbed fresh clothes for Villager. They were left with nothing, no cash at all, so they couldn't buy a single thing. The Villager was panicking too, because Mao had vanished without a trace. Before long, they realized the zebras had literally lifted off and vanished into the sky, and the stable erupted into full-blown chaos. Mr. Great demanded to know if anyone was hurt, and when they told him one person really had been injured, his face tightened. Mr. Great decided to hunt down the zebras himself, but a man stepped in and blocked him, snapping that he couldn't leave the racetrack right then. So Villager stepped up, volunteered to handle it, and told them to back off and trust him with the whole thing. He'd chase down the zebras and talk to them, no matter how long it dragged on. Great thanked him, but told him they couldn't cancel the biggest race of the time, so they'd fight back by dragging the whole thing out as long as they could. He ordered the Villager to use that moment to hunt down the zebras. But if they refused to come back, "Drop it," the Villager snapped, grinning like he already knew the ending. He'd definitely bring them back. Ash shouted for Mao, but the villager bolted the second he could, vanishing before anyone could catch him. While Great grilled his people for backup plans if the zebras never showed up or time ran out, Ash steadied his breathing and snapped. That won't happen, because Nest's fate is already in villagers' hands. He realized being a hero wasn't some easy title. It was a brutal, non-stop job. And right then, Mao burst in and snapped at them. Ash was totally wrong, because they didn't need the villager at all. They could save the nest on their own. She just shrugged and said she'd swap in the missing zebras like it was no big deal by signing her own monster up to tear down the track in the race. That monster looked like pure nightmare fuel. Ash and the others froze, then exploded into terrified screams. Ash couldn't believe where Mao got that monster, and Mao smirked, saying it was forged from the rush she felt before the war, when she could still hear flesh tearing and blood splattering in her head. Mao then begged that the villager would be safe, promising she'd raise the money for their journey by crushing the race and breaking them free from the Demon Lord's control. Ash could only hope the villager made it back safe. At the racecourse, the crowd erupted into shouting the moment they found out Zebrasis wouldn't be running. Mr. Great snapped that Zebrasis hadn't come back and said there was nothing else they could do. Mao marched forward and swore she'd never let the audience walk away feeling betrayed. Then she unveiled her colossal behemoth and blurted, breathless, what the crowd would do the second it hit the scene. Panic exploded everywhere, and even the other monsters trembled in fear. He could feel it in his bones. There was no way they'd stand a chance against something that looked scarily like a great demon lord's power. Mao warned them, if they dared to swing at her with anything less than everything, they'd better get ready, because they wouldn't make it off that track alive. The whole crowd froze in shock as every other monster started acting totally out of character. Rage and terror surged through everyone, and soon people couldn't stop wondering who that girl really was. The shock hit, then everything flipped. Excitement exploded and the crowd roared, while the rush of race anticipation sent anticipation through the roof. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, where the shadows swallow every sound, Zebrasis was kicked back by the lake, and Villager finally showed up. When Zebrasis tried to bolt again, a villager stepped in and begged him to hold on, promising he wouldn't drag him back if he really didn't want to return. He said all he wanted was to talk. Zebrasis finally cracked open the truth. He and Mr. Great once belonged to each other for life, their souls tied together like fate. He leaned in and told me he was a mutant Pegasus, decked out with black stripes from birth, then spilled every single thing that had happened to him. Zebrasis blurted that he'd sprinted to rake in money for his partner's survival. Then the races exploded in scale and popularity, and everything went wild. He got shoved into the background, reduced to nothing but an afterthought, while Mr. Great's beloved racetrack achievements stole the spotlight. Now that the behemoth had turned into the crowd's favorite racer, Zebrasis was clinging to one hope. If he could just grab a slice of that spotlight, maybe they'd relive the old days when they were real partners. And Villager couldn't stop wondering if that's exactly why Zebrasis injured himself. Zebrasis bared the truth. Those wounds vanished in seconds thanks to the elixirs Mr. Great had, but he made it clear, they weren't poured out for Zebrasis at all. They were saved for the race alone. As long as Mr. Great kept those elixirs in his hands, every wound Zebrasis took got stitched up on the spot, again and again and again, until the moment he couldn't take the cycle of forced healing and agony anymore. So he finally walked away. A villager remembered those symmetry words, and it hit hard. Selling rare items for cheap doesn't automatically mean someone's kind at heart. He knew those elixirs could patch up what everyone could see, but they also made people ignore the brutal stuff underneath, the injuries that hid where the eyes couldn't reach. And that's when he felt Zebrasis and Mr. Great's bond was starting to crack for real. After weighing it all, the villager finally bowed his head and apologized to Zebrasis, swearing he never meant for things to spiral like that. He admitted he'd seen it coming, that Mr. Great didn't care about racing when Zebrasis mattered, because the second Zebrasis vanished, Mr. Great ditched his position, panicked, and almost sprinted straight out the door hunting for him. Zebrasis snapped back with icy contempt, hissing that the villager was the new demon lord and claiming he'd never, ever understand what goes on inside a human mind. Villager admitted he couldn't truly crack human thoughts, but he swore he understood the sting, how dejected Zebrasus felt when he thought Mr. Great cared more about his work than about him. The villager then swore that Mr. Great still saw Zebrasus as part of his precious family and that their bond hadn't snapped for good yet. That's why he pleaded with Zebrasus to stay, at least long enough to truly fix what broke between them. Zebrasus mulled it over, admitted he couldn't refuse the Demon Lord's command, and called Villager nothing but a real pain. Then Villager snapped back by apologizing for how he'd acted. Zebrasus sprang to his feet and snapped that Villager wasn't wrong. Pairs should settle their fights side by side. And Yaya chimed in that they'll even turn it into better memories. Memories to cling to, then use those wings one last time and make that jerk choke on his own tears. Then we snap right back to the racetrack. Every single monster explodes forward, racing at breakneck speed. Left everyone completely stunned by the sight and by how those monsters tore through everything like they owned the place. Jolted the crowd back to the march of the Demon Lord's army. The crowd started buzzing back and forth, trading stories about the days they used to swing swords as mercenaries or train as knights in the making. They couldn't stop asking, when did they put down their swords and start clutching racing tickets instead? Out of nowhere, the crowd erupted, chanting Mao's name like a battle cry. He's calling her the Destroyer. Meanwhile, Mao was absolutely furious, barking orders for every monster to surge forward with zero mercy. And as Ash watched it all go down, he couldn't shake the feeling this wasn't how a race was supposed to be run. He just wanted Villager to come back fast. As he stared at Mao's, he realized the unease was growing in him fast. Twisted enthusiasm crawled in. But as the race roared on, it drained every ounce of excitement from him. Great's face lit up when he saw everyone pumped for the race, and he couldn't help but smile, because deep down, he knew it was all thanks to the Nest item shop. At the same time, he prayed Villager would track down those zebras and make it back. The crowd screamed and howled like it was about to erupt into war, not a race. And as she watched, Symmetry's mind snapped back to a past he couldn't forget. The day she went to Villager's father's funeral, she caught him sitting alone on a chair, shaking with tears, swearing that even with the Demon Lord defeated, he'd still keep the nest open. Back then, she was convinced it couldn't possibly happen. That tiny item shop had zero chance of surviving in a peaceful world, especially stuck in a beginner village. And the worst part? The guy running it was the official tied to Nest, the same person who tore Villager's father away from him. She swore she had to slam the shop shut and rescue the child before he drifted away with nothing to live on. She remembered saying, loud and clear, that Nest would shut down completely starting that very day. And she promised to step up, taking full responsibility for raising the villager in place of his father. Right when the villager spun around to stare at her, then it hit her like a lightning strike. She'd been shaken to her bones, and she finally understood she couldn't smash that shop or just pretend it wasn't there. The look on his face that day, like everything was about to explode. He looked just like the Demon Lord, like a silent threat that said clear as day, "I'll end the world." She stole the last thing he had left, and that terror was the real reason she fled, turning a blind eye for 10 years, convinced she didn't have the right to show up in his life again. Even so, she clung to the hope that there was still a chance to save him, no matter how much he might end up despising her, because every move she made was all for him, paving a better future for the man she refused to lose. Soon, every monster had already cleared the third corner, and the stragglers who fell behind suddenly surged forward, clawing back the distance. Mouse screamed with pure rage, shouting that this was the final stretch and that victory would be hers. Suddenly, everyone snapped their heads toward the sky as Zebrasus tore in, Villager riding on his back. Pure terror hit the whole field. Panic and confusion rippled through the crowd because only a bonded master was allowed to mount a creature like that. Ungreat's whole body shook with joy when Zebrasus showed up, and he immediately crumpled into tears. Then, as the villager slipped down and came right up to him, Great wouldn't stop thanking him over and over. But the villager carefully helped Great up onto Zebrasus. Zabrasis told him he needed to talk, right away, and that he had to hear it from him. As they shot off into the sky, Great leaned in and admitted he hadn't ridden zebrases for the past 10 years. Meanwhile, the villager tried to steady his breathing, but Symmetry kept digging, forcing him to face what he was really chasing. The villager fired back that all he wanted was to be like his father, turning Nest into an item shop that actually helps the people who need it most. He said sure, the good medicine was dirt cheap, but the real damage ran deeper, straight into the heart, and no cheap cure could ever stitch that back up. Or he thought every item shop owner had to know every product inside out and stand by the value they were selling. He argued that cheap stuff isn't automatically trash and pricey stuff isn't automatically gold. Customers should be free to pick whatever they want, no matter the price tag. But nobody should ever come along and steal the joy right off their faces. He said Nest's motto was simple: every customer has to leave satisfied. And then he swallowed hard and confessed he'd missed something crucial. So he bowed deep to Symmetry and begged her to show him the way. He admitted he still had a ton to learn before he could run the item shop like a pro, then begged her to back him so he could keep growing. Meanwhile, Great sat down with Zabrasis and dug into their past, back when they were so broke they couldn't even afford a single potion. He told them racing was the only thing keeping them alive together in this new world. He threw out a heartfelt apology, told Zabrasis to start focusing on healing, and added that if Zabrasis didn't feel like racing anymore, then he didn't have to. He leaned in and asked Zebrasis if he could soak in that stunning view one last time. Moments later, they roar back into the fray, rose blazing again, snapping right back into the race. Standing right next to Mao, he suddenly popped up and left Mao stunned, while the villagers erupted in cheers for both of them. Symmetry couldn't believe it. This outcome was even better than anything she'd ever dared to dream. And she couldn't deny it. Villager had blown past every expectation she'd ever set for him. When the race finally hit the finish line, the winner got shouted out, "Mao the Destroyer!" Great and Zebrasis crumpled on the ground, spent and trembling. Fatigue crushed him, but then Great realized he hadn't felt this kind of exhilaration in years. He realized that even without help, an owner and a top racer could still pull off jaw-dropping feats on their own. Every time they teamed up, it somehow turned into chaos and everything started to fall apart. And even after everything, Zabrasis still stayed the best partner a man could ever dream of. As Great and Zabrasis basked in a hard-earned moment of joy, Mao felt a sharp stab of jealousy. She was sure she'd blown the race and crushed the spirit. The host declared that Mao the Destroyer would take the prize money, but Mao was so pissed off she snapped back. She didn't want a single cent. Meanwhile, the villager clutched his shop's renewed license, stunned. His eyes said, "What does this even mean?" And he couldn't shake the confusion. Then Symmetry leaned in and revealed the truth. She'd tested him by making him win over every customer at the racetrack, and after she watched that race, there was no way she could ever fail him again. She told him, "You're through. Nest can keep running its business." Still, she snapped that this didn't give him any excuse to break the rules. If she caught him breaking them one more time, the shop would get shut down on the spot, and the board would put Nest under a tight microscope during every new investigation. The villager pressed, asking if that meant she'd be stuck running the shop again. She nodded and told him in no uncertain terms that he had to follow the rules to the letter. Overcome by a flood of feelings, the villager suddenly grabbed her tight and burst into tears, thanking her over and over until she snapped at him to quit, saying it looked awful. They apologized for ignoring him for the last 10 years, and after that, she told him to grind harder, outdo Tachibana, and then dropped the bombshell. Villager was now officially the manager of Nest. She said she'd be cheering for him from here on out, and the villager stayed rock-solid confident. Mr. Great soon closed in, eager to ask if he could place an order for regular healing potions, and since they'd only walked away with a few scratches, the villager checked the bruises and said they looked like the result of some hardcore play-biting. From that moment on, Symmetry hit Mao so hard she couldn't ignore it, so she doubled down, watching that villager like a hawk. Even if the villager decided to team up with demons for some reason, she'd still keep a close eye on every single move he made. Yuash and Mao went wide-eyed the second they heard that bombshell. As Symmetry gathered her things to go, a villager quietly bowed in gratitude. Realizing he'd have to pause elixir production, he still felt it. This was the real spark for his shop's next chapter. And he couldn't help grinning. Nest was officially upgraded to a 1-star item shop. Right when Symmetry turned to leave, she snapped her fingers. She'd completely forgotten to hand them the race prize money. The story snaps to a wrecked ruin. Skeletal soldiers sprawl, skewered on spikes, while a demon lounges on a mountain of skulls, staring down at a countdown etched with the number 776. He fretted about whether he should have bailed sooner, couldn't stop wondering why skeletons even existed, and then bam! An urgent pull hit him. He had to get back fast. He couldn't believe that if he didn't act now, he'd lose the one chance to personally choke the hero. Then boom! The timer flipped out of nowhere, jumping straight from 776 to 777. It hit him like a thunderclap. Somewhere out there, a brand new demon lord had just risen. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He didn't get why this happened, or why he wasn't chosen. Rage kept swelling in his chest as he demanded answers. Who dared steal the throne he knew was rightfully his? Then the story shifts, straight to the beginner village, like the world just jumped tracks. While the villager pored over the documents the Worldwide Item Shop Association's General Cemetery Division sent him, he supposedly broke down every single word on those papers like it was a secret worth exposing. She couldn't stop marveling at how badass the shop's interior looked. Then Mao went, "Wait, so how do you erase Demon Lord powers?" But when it didn't matter to her, she shrugged it off and crashed into sleep. As she climbed the stairs, she wondered, really wondered, how Villager would ever break free of the Demon Lord's chains. And Mouth Mole shrugged that he'd probably burn the whole night awake, glued to magazine pages. He said she'd finally started living like a real human, and that she'd turned into a totally different demon from the days when her weapon still dripped with crimson blood. She told him it was enough, then snapped a warning into his ears not to forget, because they'd already left the castle behind. Even now, the servant was still barred from stepping into her chambers. He swallowed his panic, apologized that he'd gotten swallowed up by his own memories, and then vanished out the door, leaving her alone. She reminded herself, she wasn't the same demon anymore. She'd been remade from the ground up. She glanced at the girly bed and cozy room, then crawled into sleep with soft toys all around her. She told them, "We worked our tails off all day." And before long, she and the kids crashed into sleep right there beside two of the toys. Turns out she wasn't just pretending. She truly, wholeheartedly loved cute things. As a demon, she'd always hated anything cute, calling it weak and downright ugly. Even with that contradiction staring her in the face, she craved those things like crazy, and she knew every last one of them was pure heresy, which is why she'd been hiding them for years. The moment they crowned her as the Demon Lord, she tossed every last bit of cute she loved aside without a single pause. As the Demon Lord, she shouldered a mountain of duties, then slipped her beloved treasures into a secret room hidden deep inside her own fortress. This secret room reportedly held her whole stash of secrets and a humiliating diary from her wild, dream-drenched youth. I mean, she was terrified that staying tangled in the Demon Lord's past would drag her down with it, would turn her into a laughingstock in the demon world. Yet the real terror sat deeper in her chest. What if her poems somehow escaped and got passed around among humans, and she couldn't even imagine what fate waited for the Demon Lords next? They said she hadn't stepped back into that castle in over 10 years. Now it sat there like a hollow husk, stripped of its lord, and she felt she didn't deserve to return after everything that went wrong because of her. So she shoved the guilt down and tried to sleep. Later, the villager yanked her attention and told her the magazine had claimed someone found a secret hidden room inside the Demon Lord's chamber. That article claimed an excavation team was about to be sent to the castle, and that very night they rushed to Ash, while Nin heard the news for the first time, and Mao couldn't stop wondering why Ash hadn't uncovered it first, half asleep and all. Ash demanded to the villager, "Why didn't you just let me stay at the shop with you?" And the villager snapped back that monsters always clock Ash the moment he's around. Plus, because Ash and the villager were technically married, the whole town would have called it weird. Ash remembered he'd already combed through the treasures and rooms, certain he'd only overlooked one. And when the villager kept talking, it turned out the Item Shop Association had uncovered a hidden space deep inside the Demon Lord's chamber. If that room was really hidden, he couldn't help it. Curiosity clawed at him, because nobody had ever seen what was inside. She figured she'd rather admit there wasn't any room like that. But once humans dug up its existence and started hunting for it, she knew she had to beat them to it and snatch it first. Because if they got there first, she was terrified they'd mock her to her face. She sensed villagers' obsession in the room rising fast, then seized the perfect excuse. She turned it into a reason to bolt back to the castle and take back everything she'd been forced to leave behind. Then she dropped the truth. There really was a hidden room, and inside, she showed me her family mementos. Hearing that, the villager snapped to attention and hurriedly apologized. Mao spun on her heel to leave, telling everyone she had to rush back to the Demon Lord's keep and grab those items before humans got their hands on them. Then she apologized, promising she'd be gone for a bit. A villager told her to hang back, and Ash charged right into the moment. He blocks her path and demands she stop, then steps in and offers to help her grab the items back. She turned to the villagers and laid it out. She and the allies mattered to them, so if they were truly friends, they had to help her. Mal refused their help, but Ash wouldn't let it go. She kept insisting that if Mal went alone, she'd be fighting at a serious disadvantage. He said there could be some hidden treasure tucked away inside, and he swore he had to see it for himself, dying to find out what was waiting within. As he talked, he grinned, cold, brutally wrong, and it instantly rattled Mao, cluing her in that something about him was seriously off. She thought it couldn't get worse. Every single person was suddenly desperate to rip open that room and find what was hiding inside. Ash then declared this wasn't just another mission. It was a wild journey into the Demon Lord's legacy, right alongside the hero they'd always idolized. The moment Mal begged them to let her go alone, the villagers practically buzzed with excitement. At last, they shut the shop down and get ready to roll out together. Ash said all he had to grab was his wallet. Then the mayor dropped them off right at the station. And the villager figured their next move was simple. Charge straight for the Demon Lord's keep. And then they tracked down the one key item that would open the area before snapping up their tickets. They kicked off their adventure, and even on the train someone hooked them up with lunch. Right when they finally crashed into their destination, they stared in shock at a giant skull-shaped entrance, and Mao's stomach dropped. Her castle had been utterly twisted into something terrifying. Now the entire place was boxed in by house after house, and an ash-laced voice said the timing was almost too perfect, like all of it only happened because of him and the calm he'd fought to bring back. Right after that, a man slid up to them and told them the Demon Lord's Keep had turned into the hottest sightseeing stop thanks to the hero tour hype. Then he couldn't stop raving about souvenirs like Castella cakes and sacred blade keychains. While the man kept talking, the villager finally snapped out of it and dashed off to scout the area for himself. They even spotted a whole wall of rental costumes, and villager, Ash, and Mao snatched outfits and slipped them on. Villagers' excitement kept climbing by the second. Mao snapped at them that this wasn't some fun detour, and just then, a tour guide stepped in to help. And the villager blurted out that they wanted to march straight into the Demon Lord's keep itself. But the guide groaned, apologized, and admitted a castle wasn't on the usual sightseeing route. It was sealed shut tight. Even with the world finally at peace, that castle stayed riddled with danger. Villager froze on the spot, totally baffled about how they were even meant to get inside. Mao suddenly snapped that she should have been dead right there, long ago. The villager stared at her in sheer panic, but right before he could even speak, they caught a sudden commotion nearby, and then saw the excavation crew coming straight for them. Mao couldn't shake the feeling they were already trying to sneak in, so they knew they had to move fast. While the excavation crew dug in, someone caught bits of their whispers. Were they really chasing a secret treasure hidden inside their captain, the so-called man named Evolution? spoke with blazing optimism and poured out gratitude to the hero, while the armory told them how that secret room was buried in plain sight for 10 long years after a string of earlier mistakes, until the Item Shop Association's pros finally unearthed it. Everyone in the group turned around and praised the hero like a legend. Evolution and the others couldn't stop the hype, but Evolution cut the moment short, apologizing fast. He had to move right now. Ash snapped with growing irritation and said they should just barge in, grab the treasures for themselves, and rub it in those people's faces. Then the guy dropped a bombshell. There was a secret path they could take to slip straight into the keep. As he guided them deeper, the place swallowed the light until everything turned pitch black. Then, finally, they clawed their way inside. The villager fumbled toward a matchstick, desperate to spark some light. But the moment his blow landed, terror ripped through him, because right in front of his eyes, a skeleton stood there, staring back. Alash leaned in and told him it was nothing but a pile of bones, then snorted that the villager was way too squeamish for his own good. As if things weren't already wild, Ash's eyes went wide when Villager's horn popped back into existence, and both of them were left completely baffled. Since it was still dead midday, they couldn't shake the fear that something was going down, and they blamed it on the fact that the villager was inside the Demon Lord's keep. It felt totally off, like he was somehow walking around in his own home. Ash warned him, "Don't you dare let your guard down for even a sec." Right then, they snapped to it. Mao had already bolted ahead, and the villager shouted at her to slow down. The villager froze like he'd felt this before, and a sharp thought hit him. His gut screamed that the Demon Lord's blood inside him was reacting to everything around him. As Mao pushed on, the villager couldn't wrap his head around how anything was still alive out there. But the moment he felt the ground under his feet, he knew something was hiding and waiting. Without warning, a hand tore out of nowhere and clamped onto him, yanking him deep beneath the surface. Mao's blood ran cold as she stared at the terrifying power she'd just witnessed. Meanwhile, Evolution and his excavation crew kept hunting through the ruins, until one guy snapped a warning, reminding everyone that civilians weren't allowed anywhere near the castle. Meanwhile, the villager found himself swallowed by total darkness, panic screaming in his chest as he prayed someone would rescue him. Until that darkness. He stumbled onto a demon that grilled him, asking if the villager really was the 7th Demon Lord. Ash and Mao sprinted through the corridors like their lives depended on it. Ash boasted that he personally slaughtered every demon in the keep. Then Mao's blood turned to ice when she realized something awful had survived, because the monster still breathing was family. And somehow she still hadn't noticed. Plus, she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't let that demon get anywhere near the villager. The demon yanked at the villager's fear, snarling for him to hurry up and seize the crown. Jabara, yes, that monster, flickered through his mind, and suddenly he remembered how he and Mao used to be as kids. She once swore she'd let him rise and become the next Demon Lord. He snapped out of that memory and swore he'd seize the next Demon Lord spot with nothing but his own ambition. Suddenly, Jabara's instinct screamed. This wasn't the smell of a monster or a beast at all. It was blood, the kind that carried 0 nutrients. He couldn't shake the feeling that Villager might not be human. And then it happened. Ash burst in, slammed Jabara with a strike, then rushed over to make sure Villager was okay. Mao lunged at Jabara herself and snapped at Ash to stay sharp and watch the whole time. Jabara's eyes went wide as black lightning cracked through the air, and he demanded answers. How was Mao, the former Demon Lord, still alive? Mao sprinted to the villagers and found out the healing potion, once mixed with their blood, couldn't keep pace with how badly he'd been hurt. Ash's own healing magic couldn't stitch him back together when his stomach was almost ripped open, and Mouthmole just delivered the worst news. There were 0 elixirs left. With no other way out, she clenched her teeth and sliced off her own hand. A few drops of her blood poured into the villager's body. She had no choice, not if she wanted to save him. Moments later, the villager jolted awake, hit by brutal, wave after wave pain. Thrown into confusion, he tried to figure out where he was. Then, when he looked at Jabara, he spotted a towering figure standing right nearby. Panic slammed into him as Ash snapped questions at the villagers, wondering if their senses had finally short-circuited, while Jabara just stood there utterly baffled and couldn't shake the question, why would the Demon Lord pick a human as her successor? Mal fixed him with a furious glare and demanded how he had the nerve to still be alive. Jabara snapped back, saying it should have been his own question. Why did Mao twist into that hideous form and just abandon her spot as the Demon Lord? And during her final battle with the hero, Ash watched the back and forth, and it left him completely baffled. And Mouthmole snapped, telling them Mao and Jabara once battled for the throne, then dropped the bomb that Jabara was Mao's own cousin. Then he told Jabara the Great War had wrapped up a full decade ago when the Demon Lord's army finally got crushed. Jabara's eyes widened in pure shock. Then a brutal, crushing pain slammed into his chest. A villager lunged in to help, but Mao slapped the brakes, stopping him cold, and yelled that the 10-year hunger had finally crushed Jabara all at once. Then she snapped at Jabara, calling him an idiot. Ash blurted out if demons even had to eat to stay alive, and the villager snapped, "Hold up, wait right here," promising he might have something from the shop. Then he pulled out a tray of baked hero cookies and thrust them into Jabara's hands. Mal couldn't believe his eyes. He started to wonder if that villager had completely lost his mind. She pointed at Jabara, who just tried to murder him, and said the only thing fueling that crazed lunatic was his dream of becoming Demon Lord. Then she warned that once Jabara got back his strength, he'd come for Villager again, no doubt. And when Villager said Jabara was still Mouse family, that was the warning. He reminded her, "You once thought you were alone, no family left." But he was right there. And now, he pressed, "So why won't you talk to me? Don't you want to know what we'll do from here?" And decided to build their future side by side, because in the end, he saw zero reason not to save Jabara. Jabara the villager fed him, and Jabara barely mustered the strength to ask for water. Then the villager calmly shoved hero tea into his hands, and the other three just froze, completely stunned by the nerve of it. After a while, Jabara finally propped himself up and shot a question. Where did Villager go? Mao answered with a cold truth. Jabara was the one who caused Villager to vanish. Mouthmole then leaned in and told the truth. When the hero swept through this area 10 years back, Jabara vanished, and back then, he convinced himself the hero had wiped Jabara out too. Jabara dropped the bombshell that the truth was way more tangled than anyone thought. Then he laid out the hero's party, 5 people total, and just as they arrived, Jabara plotted to strike down the hero before anyone even clocked what was happening, because he really believed that one move would lock him in as the next Demon Lord. But even as they tried to creep up on them unnoticed, he was finished, caught in one of the castle's traps, set right for him, and the hero's filthy magic sealed it away for good. So Ash couldn't believe it. He'd never once run into Jabara. Mal realized Jabara must have been snared by a trap right in his own home, and left there for a brutal decade, while Jabara roared in furious rage. He told her not to underestimate him, then bragged he could teleport anywhere inside the castle. But every single time he vanished, he popped right back in the same spot. That's when they realized it. Jabara was fully trapped inside the castle's seal. Jabara blurted that he wanted answers. What were they really planning to do to him? Sai snapped back that they wouldn't have dragged themselves out of their way to save him if it weren't for him in the first place. Then Jabara erupted in rage, yelling that Mao shouldn't still be alive, and demanding why she was even riding with the very hero who crushed her. He went for the jugular, accusing her of abandoning the demon race and betraying them, and demanded answers. Why was there a human standing right with her? Mal dropped a bombshell. Turns out the villager was her husband all along. But she didn't spill the whole truth to him. For 10 straight years, she hunted for a way to die, until Villager showed up, begging to save her life instead. She figured all the demons were gone for good, so she made up her mind. If a demon lord had to rise next, it would be Villager. She was convinced that the moment he took the title, her immortality would finally break, freeing her to reunite with her kin at last. She told me the next Demon Lord couldn't just take the throne. He had to forge a blood bond with the current one, then seal it all in a ritual to steal their powers. That's why she handed the villager the blood bond symbol and locked him into marriage as her husband. Jabara snapped, demanding how any of this could possibly matter if it meant teaming up with the very killer who wiped out her family. And Mao shot back that things were so dire they'd take the hero's help too if it was the only shot at finding another way, capable of wiping the Demon Lord's power clean out of the body entirely. Jabara's rage snapped into place the moment he heard it, and his killing intent erupted like a wildfire. The villager's fear hit hard, right as Jabara charged in, so Ash burst forward, slammed the attack aside, and warned that this power was seriously dangerous. Then he pointed out how Jabara could vanish into the shadows and twist them into deadly weapons. He turns the attack into something lethal for anyone who's never seen it before. Then Ash steps in and shuts it down fast, because it won't work on him, especially with that powerful affinity for light. Jabara snapped that Ash was an assassin, so in a straight fight, he'd be the one everyone could beat. And then, out of nowhere, shout blared out to Ash, and Mao snapped back that it wasn't his fault at all. She told me the blood was rejecting Jabara, and that this terrifying effect had a name. Blood sin. She leaned in and told me that when some unworthy soul drank demon blood, it could never stop their fate, because they'd never be fit to rule as demon lord. Their blood would shun them, and the sin of that crime would eventually slam the door shut. Absolute death. Death. And with Jabara being a former Demon Lord candidate, there was no way he didn't recognize what that meant. So when he still swallowed Shout's blood anyway, rage exploded in him. And he kept asking himself how the blood could possibly refuse him. Or if deep down he knew it was just plain impossible. He craved the Demon Lord's throne more than anyone alive. Even more ruthless than Mao. That snap of memory slammed into him, back when both of them were fighting to become the 776th Demon Lord, ready to duel for the crown, and Jabara swore he'd poured everything into beating her. Yet somehow, he still got defeated. Mao had told him then, straight up, that there wasn't a rule forcing her to wait for her opponent to take the first sip. Once he hit the ground, she was crowned the winner, right there. Jabara snapped with rage and demanded a proper rematch, spitting in the face of humiliation and refusing to let it stick. As she spun to walk away, she snapped at him, the once Demon Lord candidate and the 775th Demon Lord, that this mess was all on him, down to the last move. Then the story snapped right back to the present. Jabara snapped that Mao had ripped his dream out of his hands and chained him to a life of shame and agony. He snapped at her for being selfish, claiming that when the Demon Lord title started crushing her, she didn't fight. She demanded it be wiped from the world. He said he still wanted to become the Demon Lord, no matter what it took, even if he had to rule as a hollow king over a dead kingdom, with not a single soul left beside him. Then he morphed into a colossal skeleton, roaring that there was nothing left for him in this life. Ash blinked in pure confusion at what he was seeing, and Mouthmole hissed at Jabara to stop before he did something truly reckless. Meanwhile, the squad that came to crack open the castle felt a massive burst of magic hit them, and the floor under their feet started to buck and shake like it was about to split. Jabara sprang up and snarled at Mao to hand himself over. Seed told her he'd cooked up a brand new skill just for today, and he planned to smash her down with his own hands. He declared that if the blood wouldn't pick him, he'd drag the whole world into a living nightmare. So only he remained, like the final Demon Lord they'd have to fight. Ash hissed that the blood sin hurt like hell, then shot a question. So what do we do next? Mao shot back that they should finish it in one single breath. And Jabara got the death he deserved, right in the middle of his fight, as he was cut down for real by the hero. Ash nodded, then tore into a quick apology, telling Jabara he was sorry for what he was about to do. Ash swung the sacred blade at Jabara, but a villager sprang in front of them at the last second, cutting off the strike. Ash blared, "This is dangerous!" and yelled at the villager to back off, right now. When the villager sensed something was off, something didn't add up. He finally understood, back then, Mao wasn't really battling Jabara at all. He'd been fighting to protect her, and that shook everything loose in his head, making him wonder if Jabara was trying to protect her too, just in her own way. Right then, both of them snapped back to calm as memories crashed in, flooding their minds with the moment of that old promise, best friends forever, sat in his head. And even when it hit him hard, Ash shoved the thought aside and kept moving forward. Jabara ignored it too and barreled straight for the villager, grabbing him hard. Jabara just laughed because this wild twist hit out of nowhere and it left everyone else totally stunned. And he couldn't wrap his head around why he'd been picked. But one thing wouldn't budge. He was certain he was meant to be. A villager calmly swatted Jabara's skeletal hand away and declared, with zero hesitation, that he'd face the Demon Lord himself, at last. Jabara erupted into his true demon form, and just as he did, the villager's second awakened ability finally got revealed. They couldn't stop wondering what crazy skill it was. The village's heart hammered with excitement and dread as he realized he'd only managed to snag a transformation-type ability. By staring down the current Demon Lord's image and locking it into place, he forged what everyone feared as the armor of the Demon Lord. It was an ability that wrapped its wearer in invincible, anti-demon ceremonial protection, never meant for fighting humans, but built as armor that delivers absolute defense against rebellious demonic flesh. Ash went wide-eyed the second he saw the villager's face pop up as the Demon Lord. Then he couldn't help but question it. Did the armor's look even matter at all? If the shape changed, he figured the abilities would still be the same. Then the villager demanded the armor, swearing it would make him truly invincible, even against Jabara, before he burst forward to smash him. At first, Jabara was totally baffled. He demanded to know if Demon Lord blood could really spark something this absurd, especially when a villager crept closer to the human. Ash exhaled, grinning hard, thinking that armor was utterly, completely invincible. Even with that armor shielding him, the villager still groaned in pain. He fought forward toward Jabara's real body, and right as he closed in, Jabara cocked his arm to punch. At that exact moment, the villager abruptly froze mid-step. He stopped cold, then apologized for snatching Jabara's dream, saying the blood had now moved into his own veins, and he'd need Jabara to snatch it back for him. Jabara couldn't forget how he and Mao were total opposites. Mao wields jaw-dropping magical power, and everyone's pinned their last hope on her becoming the next Demon Lord. Jabara, though, didn't just feel weak, he sank into it, convincing himself he was worthless, while the demon race treated strength like righteousness and weakness like a crime. And everything about their values and how life had treated them clashed so hard it felt impossible. And still, even with all that chaos, they'd stayed the kindest kind of friends to each other. Jabbar flashed back to his childhood when a secret wish burned in his chest. One day, he wanted to say out loud that he wanted to become the Demon Lord, just like everyone else. Still, he was way too weak to compete, and jealousy for Mao burned hotter with every passing moment. He remembered Mao once blurting out that she never even wanted to be the Demon Lord. Shock hit him hard, and he couldn't stop wondering, wasn't that supposed to be her dream? And with the fear that the adults would go ballistic if they ever found out, Mao shot him a question. Could he swear he'd keep it a secret and never tell a soul? He agreed, but only if she kept his secret about human toys and human games. Then she leaned in and told him to come closer. And when he finally did, she dropped her mask and confessed her real dream. She's dreaming of one day walking down the aisle and becoming a real bride. She told me about that one night she slipped into a human village hunting for treasures and then watched a human wedding ritual unfold right in front of her. She'd spotted a woman draped in pure white, veiled and breathtakingly different from the black demon clothes, like the bride had stepped straight out of a dream. That sight hit her so hard she started dreaming one day she'd wear a bridal dress herself. Jabara didn't fully get what it meant to be a bride, but he could tell right away how badly Mao wanted it. He realized that if she ever became the Demon Lord, her dream would stay locked away forever, something she could never reach. That's when he snapped, deciding he'd help her chase that dream by becoming the Demon Lord himself. He couldn't forget how she always stepped in, shield first, when he needed protection. And it was that kindness that lit a vow in him. He'd shoulder the Demon Lord's burden himself, so she'd never have to. Jabara finally realized he couldn't keep hiding behind Mao any longer. He clenched his resolve to get stronger, just so he could help her chase her dream. And before long, fate even crowned him as a Demon Lord candidate. But by then, they cut off the conversation for good, and with every passing day, their childhood memories slipped farther and farther out of reach. Somewhere along the road, they somehow ended up losing the friendship they once had. And finally, they faced off in a no-holds-barred duel. During the duel, Jabra couldn't stop worrying because this Demon Lord trial wouldn't end until someone paid the price in blood, exactly how the rules demanded. Even with his heart set on beating her, he couldn't shake the reality. In the end, he got crushed and left defeated. After his loss, he snapped, demanding a fair fight, and wouldn't accept the verdict right then. Mao acted completely unhinged, swore he'd live to serve her, and wouldn't back down until he convinced her she'd never let him die. Ash was crushed with regret, convinced he'd dropped the ball and never truly helped Mao's dream come to life. Then the story snapped right back to the present. Jabara sprawled across Mao's lap, catching his breath. She admitted she went all in, fully serious, locked in, and ready to fight for the win. Driven by love for her kin and her army, she swore she had to take down the hero. Then it all went wrong, and in failing, Jabara's dream was stolen right out from under him, and she kept blurting out sorry over and over again. After she finally woke up, she realized she was the only one left alive from her entire army. Crushed by unbearable pain, she threw herself at every possible way to end it. She couldn't shake the dread that those words she said back then crushed Jabara with shame and humiliation, and that peace would never find them again. As she spoke, Mao's voice cracked and tears spilled fast. She was just so relieved Jabara was alive, and they'd finally found each other again. Jabara burst into tears too, then teased her non-stop by calling her a total crybaby. They'd always been the demon race's problem kids, dragging disgrace straight back onto it. Still, he swallowed his pride and admitted it. He was insanely grateful she was alive. They lunged into a tight hug, tears pouring down their faces as they clung to each other. And even Mouth Mole got choked up when he saw them. Villager, meanwhile, finally exhaled, bursting with relief and pure joy that the two had reunited at last. Mao shot Jabara a sharp look and told him, "Don't move." Jabara didn't hesitate. He cut toward the villager, dropped to one knee, and bowed his head as if he'd just found a king. He said it didn't matter anymore that the villager was human, because, as his brother-in-law, the villager had earned the right to be called the Demon Lord. Fort was totally stunned, blurted out that this wasn't the real problem, and the villager just stared. Then Ash cracked that Jabara could even call him brother too. But Jabara shot back on the spot, vowing he'd kill the hero. Then Mao told Villager this. The instant she realized Jabara had swallowed Villager's blood, she knew there was no saving him. Our Villager smashed every expectation and kept right on defying them. And that's exactly why she was overjoyed she picked him, then thanked him from the bottom of her heart. The Villager shot back that he still refused to become the Demon Lord. Then, they packed up and shot straight back to the surface. They were on a mission to snag the legendary treasure Mao hid long ago in a secret room. Mao's jaw dropped. Those items were already dug up from the hidden chamber and sitting on display outside, just like that. The treasures turned out way too girly for her taste, and the moment she saw them while the group inspected everything, embarrassment and regret hit her like a punch. Some people doubted whether they even deserved to be called treasure. Among the pile, there sat a diary, until they cracked it open. They discovered the handwriting was a total scribble, pure chaos on the page. One of them might have been able to read demon language, but no matter what, he couldn't make out a single word, none of it. They stormed back and dragged out a ton more treasures that belonged to the Demon Lord. Mouth Mole blurted out, "Why would Mao even have something like this?" But evolution just stalled, weighing every step. Feeling like he had to speak up before everyone started thinking their hard work was pointless. So finally, he guessed those things were toys some kids left behind, back when the Demon Lord snatched them up and devoured them. The crowd recoiled in terror, whispering that the Demon Lord had to be pure cruelty, dark, monstrous, and terrifying. Ash snapped that they should head back home, and Jabara just trailed them in silence, hiding in the shadows, while the villagers kept wondering if he planned to leave with them and make the nest his new life. He explained that the beginner village was already swarming with monsters, yeah, even magic beasts, and that the capital had finally caught wind of it. Then he declared he'd deal with it himself, but warned them in no uncertain terms not to bring a single thing or person that could expose their real identities. Jabara stepped in, waved it off, and said the hero was right. Then he turned to the villager with real gratitude, admitting he wouldn't have made it out without their help, and swore he'd carve his own new path from here. They started throwing around ideas for where Jabara might work and finally settle, and Ash cut in fast, saying it was totally impossible, and asking who on earth could find a place that perfect. Mao said there were almost no humans left who didn't fear demons, basically admitting how brutal it would be to pull off a world like that. Next, the story ripped straight to the item shop's headquarters, packed inside that association building. Evolution was slammed with writing a report, cramming in every detail from their castle exploration, plus the full notes from that incident. And the board members got hit with a storm of furious complaints because they were acting like complete fools. His handwriting looked like it fought the page, and right when the symmetry closed in, he demanded how the decoding was going. Evolution snapped back that it was brutally hard, and then Symmetry cut in, telling him to step aside, because they'd just brought in a newcomer who could speak demon language like it was nothing. And he begged Evolution to let the newcomer scan the documents. Then, out of nowhere, Jabara stepped in, changed his job, and calmly told them, "Hand it over. I'll handle the work." A few days after the Demon Lord's Keep incident, the story slid straight into what happened next, when the cemetery slipped off alone, drifting through the night. As the night crept in while she kept traveling, she couldn't stop asking herself why that villager suddenly wanted to talk to her, and the mayor told her to sleep easy, he'd handle the rest. After 10 long years, Cemetery clawed its way back, right into the nest. When she finally ran into Villager, she didn't recognize him and called him a demon. Then right as she raised her fist, Villager yanked her back and stopped her attack. Then they finally sat down and spilled every last detail. At the cemetery, they realized Mao had just saved those villagers' lives. Then, after he got brought back, he didn't return the same. He became a half-demon that transformed the moment night hit. No joke, she also caught wind that Villager and Mao were already engaged. A villager finally admitted the revival couldn't be stopped, and the cemetery was left reeling, demanding to know how something like that was even possible. She couldn't believe it, not even with her eyes staring right back. Then the villager leaned in and told them how Zabrasis came roaring back right in the middle of the race, stating that Zabrasis had returned all on his own and that he himself hadn't lifted a finger, and Cemetery couldn't help wondering if the brass had been talking the whole time. The villager snapped back that he'd laid it all out for a reason, because he was dying to ask her for a favor. If she could actually handle Jabara, Mao's cousin, on her own. He swore that Mao and Jabara never wanted to hurt a single human, but the two of them were stranded in this world, and now they're hunting for a home where they can finally belong in the new era. Symmetry snapped and demanded to know why on earth she was supposed to shelter a demon under her wing. Ike Jabara snapped back that he didn't just want a hiding spot. He needed a home where he could actually live with purpose. He confessed that back then he'd been way too naive, and he even ditched his duties altogether. But now he just wanted to back the shop Mao and the villager were running, do whatever he could to make sure it stayed standing. He begged Symmetry to let him be her disciple so he could train hard and rise up to become an item shop judge. Symmetry was completely thrown off. Did leaving them for 10 years really unleash all of this? The shame in her chest got so heavy she couldn't even bring herself to look Tachibana in the eyes in the afterlife. Even after Mao saved the villager's life, Symmetry still sneered, wondering if Mao was using him to chase some secret demonic plan. But the villager shot that claim down hard. Mao insisted she'd never pull something like that, and then I jumped in, telling her we'd been hunting for a way to bring Villager's body back to a fully human form. And none of this chaos would have hit at all if she hadn't stepped in. She swore to the villager she'd turn that nest into a world-famous shop to get the cure. But demons had neither the know-how nor the power to make the item shop actually take off. She got why Symmetry wouldn't trust them, but she still stepped in and begged for her help. She and Symmetry knew they didn't really need saving, especially after they missed the fact that one lonely boy had endured for 10 whole years just to keep a dying item shop hanging on. Symmetry then wondered if Mao's eyes were truly sincere when she said she wanted to help the village. Since Mao had finally agreed, Symmetry yanked them back from disaster, warning that they couldn't just execute a villager because someone misread him as a demon. Then she reminded everyone, next time, she'd protect him for sure. No excuses, no failure. And she made it crystal clear. She was no doormat, not even for a second. Everyone lined up behind her choice, and they showered her with sincere gratitude. Symmetry cut through the tension and warned Mao that if anything happened to the villager, she'd turn Jabara into a priceless weapon, and Mao had to get that message loud and clear. Mo agreed to those terms, and Ash, who'd been silent until now, blurting out that Symmetry had grabbed Jabara way too fast, especially since he was still a demon. Symmetry shot back. There's nothing that says only humans can join the Worldwide Item Shop Association. She told me the board wasn't just one kind of people, it was packed with every race and tangled bloodline imaginable, and even one of her co-workers was a half-elf. She said the association was zeroing in on new inventions from all corners of the world, no matter who you were or what power you had. They prayed every customer would finally spot the exact products they wanted. No misses, no failures, and if that wish came true, the world could breathe and stop the fighting for good. So no one would have to pin all that responsibility on one symbolic figure just to calm everyone down. She decided that if the world could finally find true balance and beauty, then it wouldn't matter whether someone was a demon or a human, they'd gladly take any help they could get. After he finished that brutal, never-ending lecture, Symmetry sliced through Jabara's hair and reshaped his look until he finally blended in as a normal human. His horns vanished completely. Mao told everyone it was an ancient spell that let demons slip right in among humans, and she couldn't help but marvel at how insanely impressive it was that Jabara could pull off magic like that. The villagers lit up with excitement, wondering why Mao had never cast that spell herself. Then Jabara snapped the conversation away before the question could land. Admitting the spell was nothing to brag about, and not something he could feel proud of. He said horns were the mark of demonic power, something demons brag about to scare humans. But when he tucked his away, people stamped him a sinful weakling, sneered at how he hid in spells from plain sight, just like the shadows he worked through. Jabara was bursting with joy, finally getting to unleash his skills, and the thrill in him was impossible to miss. Mao watched him, quietly thrilled by his reaction. Then Mouthhole hurried to get dinner ready and asked Symmetry if she wanted to eat with them, only for Symmetry to grin and say the inn would have already cooked hers, so she should head back there. Right before she left, she leaned in and told the villager about the next big get-together, the yearly association party. Only officially recognized item shops were allowed to attend. And then she said the rest of the info was all inside the magazine she'd just handed him. She couldn't promise he'd uncover a miracle like removing demon blood, but she still swore that showing up would be worth it. She said only shops earning 5 stars or better could show up, and that the whole event would kick off in 6 months. The villager froze in shock, but then he swallowed his disbelief and thanked her anyway. Symmetry let out a huge breath of relief, grinning because the villager didn't slap her idea down as impossible. She realized something wild. While she'd been fighting for everyone else, the villager had been obsessing over one thing only, his father's shop, and protecting it was the only goal he'd ever had. To protect what little he still clung to now, no matter how brutal the road ahead gets. He wasn't alone anymore. Something else had closed in. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Mao, the villagers swore they'd fight tooth and nail and do whatever it took. They declared the nest was theirs now, their brand new castle. As Symmetry took off, she told them to meet up again tomorrow and to head out early, before the streets got packed. Then she vanished. Lee and the villager cornered Ash and asked if he wanted dinner with them. Ash shook his head and declined, which stunned the villagers, because Ash always barged in with them, whether he was invited or not. Ash stared at everything he'd learned inside the Demon Lord's keep, convinced he'd find something fresh just to mess with Mao, only to realize he'd accidentally welded the bond between Villager and Mao even tighter. He dragged another demon into their circle, and the nest's growing structure started crushing in on them from all sides, leaving him raw, exposed, and drowning in shame. He couldn't shake the fear that staying glued to the Villager cost him more than he could afford to lose. He didn't just get tired, he straight up couldn't find it in him to pull them apart anymore. Maybe because Villager was both painfully naive and weirdly sincere, the only normal person left who still remembered him. During the Demon Lord incident, that Keeper Villager looked like a real demon because the way he fought was pure nightmare, pushing himself so hard it started to feel reckless. The village watched him appear, creepy, dazzling, and somehow heroic, like he was the very symbol the whole world had been waiting for, while the so-called good people felt something completely different. Ash stumbled back home, flopped down, cracked open a drink, and muttered that it was downright unsettling how a demon and a hero could both live inside the very same body. That thought hit him like a storm, and that night, he dreamed the Villager said the nest didn't need him anymore, and that freedom was finally his to take. Waking up, still buzzing from that sweet rush of freedom, he realized it had all been nothing but a dream. A few days later, everything snapped to a new scene. When the Villager finally showed up at Ash's place and shouted, wondering if he was even awake, Eve Villager clocked the truth. Mao and Jabara had left days ago, and since then, Ash had gone completely shut off, like he'd vanished behind a wall, leaning on his boss-level authority to make it happen. The Villager burst into the house and found Ash absolutely wrecked, so drunk he could barely stand. He leaned in, checked his pulse, and confirmed he was still breathing. He couldn't stop thinking how long Ash had been stuck like that, but Ash brushed it off with a vague answer. This wasn't new for him. His depression hit in cycles, and he called it just another episode. The Villager could tell Ash hadn't fully bounced back, but he was out of ideas, so he grabbed the slime and demanded, "Can you reach Mao for me?" But Ash shot forward and stopped him cold, demanding that no one tell her a single thing. He swore that the only person who could ever make Mao cry was him, back when he was the unbeatable hero, and admitted he loved seeing her eyes glare with hatred and spill into tears. Ash kept pushing her to submit, and the moment Villager heard those words, horror slammed into him. Then Ash snapped, "Look at me now." Crushed by the wreckage in his own mind, he choked out that he'd never want to wound Mao's pride, the way the mighty Demon Lord seemed to command everything. He demanded the Villager back off, insisting he'd bounce back on his own. After a while, the Villager slipped out, then came sprinting right back with cleaning supplies, kicked the door open, and blurted out an apology as soon as he was inside. Ash snapped at him to go home, and the Villager shot back, "If you don't clean this, it's going to start reeking." While he was there, he knew he had to fix everything, so he told Ash to come with him and made sure he said, "I grabbed food from the inn, too." The Villager started scrubbing the house, set a meal in front of Ash, and then casually pushed him to stay the night. He kept saying that every time he got nervous or lonely, the mayor would show up and lie down right beside him, so he figured, then we should sleep here together. After they left the Demon Lord's keep, it hit everyone hard how legendary Ash used to be, known as a hero all across the world, and now Villager couldn't wait to hear about Ash's old adventures. Not because he admired Mao, this was his silent payment for staying shut about everything in front of him. Yet Ash's rage still boiled, soaking the whole situation in anger. That night, as Villager crawled into bed, he blurted out that he'd never crashed at a friend's place before and swore he just wanted a real boys' night. Then Ash cut him off, snapped, and told him to shut up and sleep. I kept it to myself, baffled that he even let that Villager stay, and even more shocked that he was acting like some lonely, sentimental fool. When Ash whipped around, he noticed the Villager was already out cold, and that realization made irritation spark in his chest. He screamed at him and even swung a punch. Then the Villager muttered that it was Ash who told him to shut up and go to sleep. Then he swallowed his pride and apologized for barging into his space, admitting that Ash had been acting distant for ages. At last, Ash dropped the truth, spilling his past and admitting he'd once been a total no-good thief and that everything flipped the moment he stumbled on the World Hero book and got utterly hooked. As the years piled up, he just kept rolling with life until he finally called himself a hero, but the truth was brutal. He chased fame and money, and that's the whole story he swore was it. So the villager finally got it and blurted out right there, asking if Ash had been trekking this whole time just to chase that dream. Ash figured the villager would read it that way, then admitted the truth. His whole life, he never really put down roots anyway. 10 years had flown since he crushed the Demon Lord, and the kingdom rewarded him with a monstrous mansion right in the royal capital, packed with gear and goodies meant to save the hero. The author definitely wasn't writing this for Ash himself. The villager nodded like he finally got it, then blurted out that Ash wasn't just any hero, he was the real deal, because he managed to mend the bond between the villagers and the summaries. And that's exactly how Mao finally found her cousin again. None of it would have happened if Ash hadn't stepped in, poked around, and started investigating. That's what you need to understand, the villager said, was the real reason they crowned him the hero of the nest. He added that once Ash finally felt better, he could always come back to work whenever he wanted. After that, they both crashed into sleep, completely unaware of what was waiting. Mao and Mouthhole were stuck under the floor, soaking up every single word like they had front row seats. Ash shot awake, feeling ridiculously refreshed, like someone hit the reset button, then immediately wondered why this time felt so perfect. He never needed booze to knock out. Then the villager grinned, bowed in apology, and rushed him into the truth. Breakfast first, because Mao would be back soon. Ash leaned in and asked if he could tag along for breakfast. A villager greeted him with open arms, like his arrival was the best news all day. As soon as they rolled in, they found Mao already waiting on the spot. Breakfast was all set and ready to go. Then the villager just froze, utterly stunned, while Mao yanked Ash aside. She told him, straight to his face, that he was family now, and that vanishing for days without a word wasn't going to fly. Then she warned him to brace himself, because his punishment was coming. After breakfast, she expected him to rush straight to work, and she made it crystal clear he wasn't seeing home again until he'd paid the shop back for every day he'd skipped. Ash burst into laughter, poking fun that she must actually like him, especially since she went and cooked a homemade meal like a devoted wife. And just like that, their familiar teasing slid back into place as life slowly started feeling normal again. The mayor stood at the front entrance, flashing a warm smile as he welcomed everyone into the party, and burst out to announce the Hero Memorial Museum was finally finished. The wait was over. Villager burst into real happiness and blurted out how it was built, and the woman beside him answered that while Villager had been off on business trips, the whole thing had been prepared in silence. She said the mayor grabbed the money meant for buying the nest and shoved it into a last-minute sprint, ordering skilled carpenters to finish the construction as fast as humanly possible. The whole group was stunned when the woman didn't stop there. She claimed the nest had been thriving lately. She said the museum was expected to flood the village with visitors, and she genuinely prayed that once again, the nest would be buzzing with customers. The villager lit up even more than before when she heard her words. Then the mayor stepped in, promising to show them around the museum, only to admit it was empty for now, saying he'd come back the next time he visited the nest. He planned to pop open the floorboards and dig out the perfect items for display as they pushed inside, even though they knew the preparations weren't done yet and that villagers weren't allowed in. They were totally thrown off. Then several men stepped in, grabbed the moment, and ordered them to turn back right there. One of them spoke first. He burst in and introduced himself as Lion, the branch manager, then ripped into them, telling them to get out and calling them beggars like they were trash. The villager dragged the mayor straight to his shop. The moment the mayor finally snapped open and admitted he was terrified, he confessed that he'd been scammed. As the people who tracked him down promised him a breathtaking museum and acted so kind and solid, he truly believed them. While Mao was poring over the contract, she couldn't help but wonder if the mayor had actually read it before signing, because every single detail was laid out in plain black and white, and once the building was finished, ownership would be stripped and handed over to those people. Ash said the mayor probably never doubted them for a second and signed the contract on autopilot without even bothering to read it. He added that the contract name wasn't random. It pointed straight to a top-tier item shop with a massive store right in the capital. A villager dug that name out of a magazine and remembered the truth. Lastiad was the kingdom's biggest item shop, hands down. Ash then called it out. This department store didn't even stock carpentry tools, let alone offer any construction services. The villager figured it out instantly. Those people couldn't be real. They had to be imposters. And they argued the contract was supposed to be invalid, yet the mayor doubled down, staring at the store emblem and insisting it looked real, then demanding, "So how on earth can you prove those people aren't legit?" Emeo grinned and said, "It's that simple." As the item shopkeeper, Villager knows the difference between real service and a total fraud. So just go to the store and check for yourselves. When they finally reached the museum, it was packed to the brim, so crowded it felt unreal, while the mayor shrugged and said the nest was still as empty as a ghost town, like it always was, leaving them totally baffled. They bolted inside to see what was going on in there. They watched the lion roar in fury at a bunch of kids demanding their wallets, and when they complained, he snarled that he wouldn't take any complaints, he just grabbed their wallets as a noise feed. Mao barked at him, demanding to know what he thought he was doing to those kids. One of the boys shouted that the man had cheated them with fake items, and Elion's rage ignited. He snapped that the kids must have broken the things themselves. Then he demanded his money back, turned on the whole village, and started spitting insults, calling the villagers barbarians. With tears streaming down his face, the boy insisted, "I didn't break a thing! This is just a normal clock!" Leon barked back, demanding if they were really accusing his products of being defective, and a woman hurriedly tried to tell him she'd just grabbed one to take a closer look. Leon didn't stop. He kept screaming at everyone, demanding payment for the items, calling them dirty beggars, and ordering them to come back only after they finally had enough money. Mal's rage kept building, and she snapped that it felt like Lion was trying to soil Loosejaw's name on purpose. Then she turned her focus to the children. He leaned in and gently asked if anyone was hurt. One of the boys choked out, heartbroken, that they'd heard the capital would sell every kind of amazing toy, and that was exactly why he'd been buzzing with excitement in the first place. The lion's rage erupted like a wildfire, and snapped at the kid to go tell his parents they better bring the compensation. While all this was happening, he demanded they cough up every coin they'd been hiding, and just as he went to keep talking, a villager stepped up fast and flat out stopped him cold. Lion scoffed, snapped that he didn't know what kind of villager thought he was, and mocked him by sneering that his item shop was basically on the edge of bankruptcy anyway. The villager fired back that chasing more customers didn't give anyone the right to bulldoze other businesses. His grip cinched tighter as rage surged. He demanded what would happen if those fake products ever injured kids, and who exactly would answer when things got that far. He added that the moment customers heard a new shop was opening, they lit up like they'd stumbled onto treasure from some far-off, uncharted world. And Lion rode that excitement straight into trouble when a villager snapped that he had no business calling himself an item shopkeeper. Everyone around them was staring in stunned silence, like the world just froze in place. Leon is demanding everyone's money back, and he's forcing the building to be handed over to the mayor, or else he'll unleash serious consequences. Ash rushed in and shouted, trying to steady the villager before they lost their cool, telling him that if he didn't want to wake up tomorrow with a brutal sore neck, he'd better rein in that rage and hold himself back. Line yanked the contract out, jabbed at the words, and declared it all clear. Ownership was his now. Then he snapped back, saying Villager couldn't be accusing them of being fake. The poor villager would have to dig up solid proof. Leon shut them down with a brutal threat. If they came at him again, he'd cut off their legs. Then the story cuts to the mayor's house, and the mayor crumples in tears, shoving every bit of blame onto himself as he admits he never read the contract closely enough before signing it. He raged that he'd dragged the wrong people into the village, thieves who snatched every donated coin and stomped all over everyone's kindness. He was sure the villagers had turned their backs on him, convinced someone like him could never breathe life back into the village, so he even begged to leave. Then a villager stepped in, told the mayor to calm down, and snapped that he wasn't to blame. He told us that even if the building hadn't been taken, the Hero Memorial Museum still wouldn't have been finished right, because not one real exhibit even existed to put on display. The mayor kept going, claiming the only real place the hero had ever stepped into was the nest, proof living only in the villagers' memories and Tachibana's own recollections. And Ash just flashed a smile. Then the mayor finally admitted he'd never once thought Villager was lying, but the rest of the village still couldn't shake the doubt that the hero had truly been there all those years ago. He admitted he felt weirdly thrilled to finally dig up the truth of what really happened, and even called himself a failure for letting it all spiral this far. He finished by saying that the nest would never earn a 5-star rating while that clumsy idiot was still around, and if they had to, they'd just haul him out of the village, dragging him all the way. The mayor warned that taking them on head first would be deadly, but the villager shot back that any fighting between shops was strictly off-limits. He told the mayor to act like he hadn't seen a thing earlier. While they fought over what to do, villagers snapped that they couldn't unleash monsters on anyone inside the village. He said, "If you don't have the real proof, then you'll have to bring out the real deal," said, and the villager told him he was snagging a paid vacation that started tomorrow and that he wouldn't be around. He demanded the mayor hand the whole thing to him, saying it was finally time to pay back an old debt. Mal felt completely lost, staring at Ash like, "What are you up to?" While Ash casually suggested they could call it a sudden restriction on summoning arts. The very next day, a man stormed into Lion's shop to deliver shocking news. Something just didn't add up. The whole shop froze in total silence the moment the real hero stepped into Villager's shop. And the whole room froze. Everyone gawked at him, stunned, speechless, as the man dropped the truth. It was Ash, right there in real life. He leaned in and demanded of Lion, "Did that villager grill you about why the elixirs are missing?" Stein was famous for keeping elixirs piled high, so that felt weird to Lion. Then he admitted the brand did stock them, but not every branch carried a single bottle. The mayor stared at the hero in the beginner village and muttered, "What are you doing here?" And the hero shrugged, telling him he was traveling incognito. He finally realized he needed a real break from his work, and admitted it had been forever since he last took one, which is exactly why he was pushing to visit the beginner village and even swing by the old nest, too. And when the crowd heard the rumors were real, that the nest was the very first item shop the hero ever stepped into on his journey, everyone just froze in shock. The hero verified with total certainty that the very first thing he'd ever bought really did come from that nest. The crowd went wild, screaming like the world was about to explode. Fans roared at the top of their lungs, scrambling for autographs. And when the chaos swelled, Lion barked at the hero. He slammed the accusation that he was a fraud, then declared the real hero would never bother to show up in a place this remote, and snapped back that it was nothing but a dirty trick. The hero calmly drew his sword and leveled it at Leon. And then Mao dropped the bombshell that there was only one Excalibur in the whole world. And the hero had it on him, locking his identity in with zero doubt. The whole crowd froze in shock when the hero showed up, and their composure cracked instantly, because it hit everyone that these imposters had once teamed up with Lastiad. The hero suggested they should call the big main store and demand they reconsider letting people like that run a branch in a starter village. The lion froze for a beat, and the hero shot back coldly, demanding to know if they really planned to keep running their scheme right in front of him. He declared it was time to face the truth. Then, under pressure, the truth burst out. They set their sights on revenge, furious that Lastiad had swooped in and bought them out. They cracked open the shop just to poison the brand's name, and they picked the beginner village on purpose, so far from the capital that they figured nobody would ever bother to report what they were doing. After Lisa finally learned the truth, rage exploded. She snapped that their shop was probably useless even before it got wiped out. Villager Yanon, though, finally exhaled, grinning because everyone got their money back, and Lastiad's name stayed untarnished. The mayor practically burst with joy, announcing they just landed a brand new contract, one that guarantees the building will be handed back to him. Villagers blurted out that it didn't feel right to let those people slip away so easily, then asked what would happen if someone tried the same trick somewhere else, and Ash shot back, calm but firm, that there was no reason to worry because he'd already ratted them out to Lastiad. The mayor couldn't stop smiling as he gushed that the hero himself showed up on the very last day, and then Ash dropped the bombshell. He'd been the one who reached out, because he and the hero go way back from Ash's days roaming as an adventurer. Still, the mayor couldn't stop grinning at this big reveal, while Yu and Mao quietly joked that he'd never, ever sniff out the whole truth. The mayor admitted he wished the hero could have stayed longer, but he understood just how swamped he must be. Then he promised one last thing. The hero left behind an incredible gift. Shards of his journey, remnants, and tiny traces were scattered all through the village. That's what finally let the Hero Memorial Museum get completed at last, right at that moment. The mayor grinned and swore the village would explode with visitors any day now. The villager's face lit up for real, and then Ash swung back to him and said, "It's official now." He fired off the question of whether the hero's backstory could really stand up, then said the body doubles would be shipped back to the capital and that the whole setup would be officially stamped and recognized by the Item Association. Ash admitted this was the first time he'd ever rebelled while playing the hero, and even joked he could practically see the king's temper flare still, though. He told me it felt unreal seeing all those smiling faces as he handed out autographs, something he'd never lived before. With a satisfied grin, he shot Mao a look like, "See?" Then Ash stepped in and told the villager to sign the display boards, so they all scribbled their names, and the hero's name too. Mao said the place was finally starting to look like the nest again, and the villager nodded right along, and promised he'd guard it like his ultimate treasure, forever. He said he'd never forgive what those people did, but he understood how gutting it must have been to lose the shop they once loved. But yeah, he's convinced the greatest item shop in the world is Lastiad, and he can't stop wondering who's finally going to claim it as their own. Next, the story slams straight into Lastiad's department store. A man leaned in and told the company president, "Your carriage is ready," then warned him the next business meeting was seconds away and practically shouted, "Hurry!" He reminded him they couldn't be even a minute late, and Riley admitted with a sheepish grin that even when they always showed up on time, they still got stuck waiting on everyone else, though the hosts at least kept sweet desserts coming to make the delay bearable. After that, the president nodded and said they'd move forward, then added they were about to pay a visit to the most troublesome, spoiled client on the planet. At the king's order, he hit up the villager's shop, crafting an item as he walked the monsters through every step of brewing the nest's bath potion. He handed the finished potion straight to Teller's mom, Coral, and her shock was instant, because it actually worked. She asked for enough to last the week, and the villager nodded, thanking her, then warned her to stash it somewhere dry and throw out whatever was left. Once he was done using it, he teased that he'd toss in one of their newest potions as a free sample. Coral froze, staring like, "Are you sure you want to give that away?" The villager nodded and told them it was just a test, then bragged that he'd tweaked the potion to last longer and swapped the container to a bottle for easier storage, before spelling out exactly how to use it, and Coral replied that she had zero problems with it. He handed it over and promised he'd get her more if she liked it. Then she took off. Mao shot the villager a question, did he land another sale? Then pointed out they'd better crank up production in the back right away. Back. A villager leaned in and insisted, "Next time, we sell those potions in Numbat what?" He knew every one-star item was doomed to get phased out, yet somehow he'd found a way to keep them alive. With their regular customer, Mr. Great, throwing more money their way from the race course, their budget ballooned, and that cash let them fire up even more experiments and unlock fresh resources. The plan hit perfectly, and customers poured in like crazy. Plus the monsters they'd saved stuck around too, because Villager kept using them for those sharper, targeted products. And then, Mao noticed the monsters acting way off, and when someone called it out, the Villager hurried in to soothe him, saying they already had everything they needed. Mao snapped that sales weren't climbing nearly as hard as anyone hoped, said the progress was crawling way too slowly, and admitted she didn't know if they could reach 3 stars within 6 months. She also called out the fact that the 5-star criteria were still a total mystery, and Villager started thinking about how to talk in perfect symmetry. Even with the risks spinning in his head, he figured the usual review would happen a whole month before the party, and he couldn't stop wondering if they could pull off every single thing in time. Ash asked why they had to rush, and Saul fired back, "There's always next year." And look, it wasn't like the whole village was going to blow up just because the Demon Lord's blood wasn't yanked out right away. He swore he couldn't even understand why they had to join the same year. Nisha snapped and accused Ashwas of sabotaging everyone's confidence. But Ashwas shrugged and said the world wasn't ending, so they could just try again next year. And in the meantime, they should grow the store little by little, on their own pace. The villager backed Ash's idea, but warned that if he quit the plan the second he decided to try, he'd fall into complacency and bail the moment a roadblock hit. He couldn't stand the idea of going back on his own expectations, so he focused on one thing only: getting invited to that year's business party. Right then, his stomach betrayed him with a loud growl, and the villagers' faces turned beet red. He quickly laughed it off, blurted that it was already lunchtime, and said he was heading out to grab some food. As he headed out to grab something, he couldn't shake it. Those past few days had him buzzing with this weird, unstoppable excitement. He used to stay locked in, just trying to keep the nest running, but now he craved one thing: for everyone to finally admit a level 1 villager like him wasn't so bad. He couldn't stop thinking, would Ash and Mao eventually ditch him and ride off without him? Then a villager heard voices crackle through the air. When he checked, he froze. There was the mayor, out there teaching kids how to fire a grappling hook and hit the target, stressing that they couldn't just chase raw power, they had to time the snap of the motion at the exact right moment. The kids just didn't get it, and when Villager stared in awe, he blurted that this was the village's rite of passage, the mayor's demonic grappling hook, and the mayor snapped that Villager had arrived at the perfect moment, then suggested that he proves it all by demonstrating with the scaling rope. A villager tried to prove it by snarling that the real trick was to whip it around with pure, fiery rage and slam it into the scalers. Teller's jaw dropped at that explanation, and he couldn't figure out what in the world the villager was even talking about. The villager swallowed his pride, apologized, and admitted he didn't think he was fit to teach, but the mayor shut that down, telling him not to underestimate himself, praising his skills, and explaining that kids sometimes need clear examples more than words, insisting that one good demonstration would be enough. Hearing that, the villager couldn't help but realize just how powerful a real example could be. Later, he leaned in and told Ash and Malpai everything. If they can't crack a strategy to reach 5 stars, then ditch the guessing and grab a real example to learn from instead. A villager finally made up his mind. He was heading straight to the royal capital to hit the only 10-star shop, La Stia department store. Mal shot a confused look, and the villager quickly explained that it actually made perfect sense. And heading for the royal capital wouldn't just get them there, it would also give them a chance to finally catch sight of Jabara. When Mao heard that, his excitement erupted, and he hustled to get ready to race for the royal capital. A tiny mouth mole snapped and argued that the capital was a human city, and he refused to let the demon lord step inside. Then Mao's patience finally snapped too, growing irritated. Ash flat out refused the idea without budging an inch. He flatly said he didn't need to explain why he'd come to the village, then snapped that there was zero chance he'd ever return to the castle. Just the thought of seeing it again made him feel sick. Mao ordered him to stay put, guard the shop, and keep a sharp eye on everything. The villager leaned in and said he and Mao would hit the streets and learn everything they could. Then, he promised that if trouble ever popped up, Ash could rush to the royal capital and tell them, and they'd back him up however they could. Good, the villager snapped, saying Ash had been babying that man-child way too much lately. Then Ash shot back, "Yeah, but we still have to grab medicine, so somebody's going to the capital no matter what." Still, the threat from the capital, someone promising his death, flickered back, and that chilling memory made him pause. Mao insisted everything was fine and told them to get moving, and the villagers' excitement flared right up. Ash still didn't know if he should follow them or stay behind. And then, right when it mattered most, he had to choose. In the end, he decided to roll with them, hustled to the station, and bought 3 tickets bound for the royal capital. As they rode through the journey, the villagers suddenly remembered something wild. Back in ancient days, that city used to be the capital of welfare. A land where every coin gleams, overflowing with wealth, packed with knowledge, and buzzing with life and prosperity. Life moved on, and little by little a castle rose, pulling everyone's hard-earned wealth into the hands of whoever held power. And the moment they finally rolled in, the city was already legendary. Its official name had settled in, the royal capital, Fortestadt. The villager's heart pounded as he finally realized just how badly he'd wanted to be here all along. Ash spotted it and snapped a warning. Those seeds were boxed in by windows everywhere, meaning someone could hit them from any angle. So he told the villagers to stay on guard. Then he tried to calm them down, but his words only fired up the fear even more. Mao started rubbing her hands, pure nerves in motion, and the villagers couldn't stop wondering if something was seriously wrong. And all the while, he worried, once they stepped into the capital, someone would spot Mao's golden eyes and clock her as the girl who'd been roaming around with those same eyes 3 months ago. The villager realized Mao was trying to hide her golden eyes, but Mao insisted she wait, saying it looked excruciating. And then he blurted that he still couldn't believe humans ever managed to force something like that into their own eyes, because even everyone else had been terrified of it at first. Then he lit up and told me Leela had cooked up this killer color drop potion for her cosmetic line. 1 sip could flip your irises to any color you wanted, and it was a godsend for demons who couldn't pull off transformation magic. He told them to breathe easy, throw their eyes wide open, and remember, didn't they say they couldn't do this alone? Then he promised he'd help them, and Mal froze, stunned, wondering if Ash was actually enjoying every snext of it. She couldn't shake the thought that Jabara had never once been forced through something like this. Then Ash changed his clothes and blurted that he was heading out to meet his friends. He ordered them to mind their manners, roam around the area, and swear they'd be back at the inn before sunset, and the villager nodded, ready to follow through. Mao couldn't stop wondering if Ash was about to break and puke on somebody. A villager demanded, "Why aren't you going straight to your destination?" And right after that, they snapped into motion for the 10-star item shop, the Lost Yard department store. When they finally reached the Lost Yard department store, their jaws dropped at how unbelievably huge the whole building was. They tore through a bunch of floors and, even ended up in the bookstore. And the moment they stepped onto the food floor, everything hit them at once, and they got absolutely swept up by what they saw. Right as they were still processing everything, Mao suddenly snapped out, yelling at the villager to come over, so excited it practically spilled out of her mouth because she'd tracked down a bride. And now you're going to want to know what happens next, right? The villager hurried over to inspect it and froze, because she wasn't looking at anything else at all. It was a whole display of wedding dresses. Mao kept calling them brides and pushed villager to stare hard, saying there was even a microscopic bride hiding among the bunch. The villager froze, unsure if she really thought wedding dresses were what people called brides. He thought about stepping in to correct her, then stopped himself. Didn't want to shatter the magic of the moment. Mao then spilled the truth. Jabara had vowed he'd one day turn her into his bride. The moment she spotted the price tag, her jaw dropped. $3 million. And said it cost a fortune. She said if they ever hoped to buy something like that, they'd have to turn their nest into a 5-star shop. Right then, ding! A bell chimed, and the girl blurted out that today's special deal was ready. Hero model boots, sold only in the royal capital. 1 customer gets 1 pair, she said, and they'd already pulled the most requested sizes ahead of time, because the stock was so limited it might vanish before you even blink. Blasting everyone to get in line fast, the villager lit up the moment he heard it, then saw, watching Mao question why anyone would waste money on something like that. The villager shot back, "Yep, those boots are limited edition goods." Like that was the whole reason. When Villager said he wanted to buy the item, Mao snapped that she'd check another floor first and told him to meet her again in an hour in front of the bridal shop. Villager nodded, then slid right into the line. A boy slid right into place behind him and started grumbling, furious that everything was running so late. That was the exact reason he despised dealing with people who couldn't respect a single minute. Then he swept his gaze over the villagers and demanded to know if the guy was from the countryside. The villagers' weapons weren't getting any love that season. He figured Villager had to be a die-hard fan just for the limited edition boots. But Villager snapped back that he wasn't hunting the boots at all. He only swung by out of pure curiosity. The boy said he really hoped Villager would snag a pair, and then laughed that he looked downright lucky. Still, he groaned that waiting in line was torture, so he urged Villager to chat for a while. Yet Villager's stomach sank because he had zero clue how to talk to strangers, and the only time he ever spoke up was when he greeted customers at his shop. The boy kept going and going, spilling his story non-stop, laying out all kinds of wild details. Villager snapped in frustration. This kid just kept talking non-stop while he couldn't even get a single word out. The boy took a step closer and demanded to know if the villager was there to study. Right then, a staff member rushed in and blurted that every shoe size was gone, sold out. He bowed, apologized for the hassle, and promised they'd post the next sale date as soon as it was confirmed.